Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
And Myers hits it high in the air to left field. It sends back Hunter Falefa onto the warning track at the wall, and that ball is gone! A 3-run homer for Jake Myers, and a 3-1 Astros lead.
David Schneider, the batter, swings at the first pitch, and he vaults it high, deep, and gone! All the way out of the ballpark, and the legend of David Schneider only grows. How is he doing it?
And now the 3-2. And a high fly ball to right. It's deep and it's on its way. And Freddie Freeman with a 3-run home run. And the Dodgers are doing damage to their former teammate Rich Hill. They are beating them to a pulp. It is 6-0. Still in the second inning.
And the 0-1 to Wallner, swinging a fly ball, right center field, deep. Back it goes at the track, at the wall. That ball is gone, a home run. Matt Wallner with a walk-off home run to right center field. And the Twins come back, walk off the Diamondbacks, and sweep this weekend series.
Yeah, I really have no thoughts, honestly. Obviously I trust the leadership. I trust Big Ten, Tony Petiti, Trev's awesome. He's so communicative and all those things. So I'm kind of in my little bubble right now, so we're just about our team, making sure that I think the key for all teams right now is as realignment happens in the coming years, knows what the future is going to hold, making sure that my job is to make sure the University of Nebraska is relevant nationally. And so I just have a lot of trust in the Big Ten and the leadership. And I think it's, not only the conference of college football, and so I'll play wherever they have to tell us to play.
Good morning. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Out on remote this week as we are at Indian Creek, the club at Indian Creek for the Pinnacle Bank Championship. It is Monday. It is beautiful. The sun is coming up. The dew is kind of shimmering on the luscious rough as we were driving in on a golf cart to hole 17 where the Hurrdat Sports Pavilion is. We're also next to the Patron Zone, which is right up my alley, but before we go any further, this isn't DB. This is Ravi once again in the chair. Good morning, Ravi.
Good morning, man. How you doing? You sound like you got a little Jim Nance in you over there this morning.
Okay,
with
here we go.
Dew on the grass.
Okay. Yeah. Put me at high standards while my voice is shot this week.
What happened, Andrew?
Oh, gosh. I did it to myself, too.
Isn't that usually how these things happen?
I thought about maybe Andrew's just whispering because he's on the golf course and, course etiquette, keep your voice down. And then I said, no one's going to believe that. So as I'm driving in, I'm like, I guess I'm just going to tell the truth. So over the weekend, I spent some time back in St. Louis again. Thank goodness this is the last trip in about a month. But they were back-to-back weekends, and it was bachelor party weekend for my future brother-in-law. And so what we did was we went to the Cardinal game on Friday night, which was great because it was my way to get drunk during conference realignment talk because that was drunk enough on its own.
I was going to say that came with its own level of drunkenness,
right?
For sure.
So, we were there and I was obviously sports betting.
Well, of course.
So we had a lot of fun. My brother and I showed up about an hour before the game.
Okay.
And it's $5 Busch Light during the first hour.
Okay.
They have cans, 12 ounces. So you can have two. So we're putting away some beer. And after we go to our seats and we join the guys and we have some bets that are alive, it was the same game parlay for the Birds. It was a home run bet in the Birds game too. And I'll level all these out. And then there was a home run bet just for the day. We put 3 random guys hit home runs.
Okay.
Well, Ravi, by the 6th inning, every bet was still alive.
Okay.
Every single one. We had a 7-leg same game parlay. We only needed Elias Diaz to get one more single. We needed, I think we need one more hit from Tyler O'Neill or just one hit from Tyler O'Neill. So we were like grooving in the same gamer.
Okay.
Then you look over at the same game home run bet. I bet on both Nolans to hit home runs.
Okay.
They both did.
Okay.
But I'm a greedy son of a gun that I put 2+ RBIs in for each. and they each hit solo shots. So now we're just hoping for RBIs.
Yeah.
Well, then Gorman hits another home run, so he cashes his RBIs. We just need Arenado to hit a home run. Okay, and then in our final bet, the home run parlay, we had 3 guys. My brother kicked it off with Austin Riley. He hit a home run.
Okay.
I had Brian Reynolds, who hit his 10th home run on the road this year.
Nice.
And we had Kyle Schwarber in there, batting below the Mendoza line. All he does is hit bombs. And we were watching his final AB. It was about the 8th inning, hit by pitch.
Oh.
So that bet didn't cash. And
That's
we're like,
the worst.
uh-oh. Now we have some bad juju following along. At first, everything was going great. Not anymore. So 8th inning goes, 9th inning is here. We'll start with the top of the 9th. Same game parlay. Now we only need Diaz. Tyler O'Neill hustled out an infield single. We only need Diaz to get a single.
Okay.
Rockies are up 9-4. The amount of Cardinal fans on their feet were probably the ones leaving the ballpark.
Sure, yeah.
So, maybe about 1,000 people were walking out of the stadium as the 9th inning rolls in. And then you see these 8 random guys up in the nosebleeds looking down on their feet, chanting parlay as Diaz is coming to the plate. Yes, I was one of them.
Sure. Of course.
And so he ropes a single, and the 8 guys in our section, you could probably hear us on the other side of the ballpark. That's how silent it was.
Well, sure, yeah.
Until we hit the parlay. So we each cashed like $200. Great start. Well, then Arenado comes up in the 9th. Again, down 9-4.
Okay.
Bases loaded, this is what you talk about when you're playing baseball in the backyard.
Yep.
Bases loaded, 2
Down
outs.
9-4.
Down 9-4.
I have to get this hit to cash this rando's parlay.
So we only needed a single because Gorman was on second base.
Okay.
So an RBI with 2 outs always
Gets it done.
He strikes out. We were all cheering. I'm like, rub the jersey. I'm wearing an Arenado jersey. So that's kind of how the weekend started. But really the reason I lost my voice was because, and I told myself not to do this.
So you didn't lose your voice cheering for your parlay.
No.
Okay.
No, I told myself
right.
not to do this, but I drank a good amount on Saturday.
Okay. A healthy amount.
Yeah. And when I drink, I don't think people could expect me getting louder, but I do. And so as I drink, I get, I blow the levels off of what a normal voice level should be at. And
the look Sasha just gave you, by the way, was
yeah, she knows.
hilarious.
She knows. So, it starts off, my normal speaking voice is loud, right?
I think you start at like a 7.
Oh, it could be more. I may take the over.
Okay, fair. I was trying to
So
be,
if I start at a 7,
generous here,
which I just like to be heard. It's a me problem. I get it. But as I drink, I want people to hear me more and more. And now I talk more too.
Yes.
When I drink.
So you have the volume plus the quantity of talking.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the time I get home, I'm like, oh, here we go. You're going to bed. Your throat's a little scratchy. You're trying to chug some water. You know what's about to happen.
Yep.
I'm driving back yesterday. I'm like, I'm not speaking. Like, Ashley, no, I'm not mad at you. Like, I'm just trying to preserve what the moneymaker, right?
Sure, yeah.
And look at Cam as he's walking away here. I feel so bad for this guy. Why didn't he take the cart?
I would say he was sitting in the cart. He got out of the cart to go on a walk. So this is self-inflicted. I do not feel bad.
Well,
for
look
him.
at he's walking up the hill.
He looks like he's regretting his decisions right now.
Well, it's a 10-minute walk to get back to the
honest.
clubhouse from here. Besides, I got off track. So we're driving back, and we get back home, and my neighbors are outside. I don't want to let Molly out because I know she's going to want to run over to the neighbors, but then I have to talk to the neighbors because she just had oral surgery last week and they give her treats all the time. Well, the treats they give her are those milk bones and they're really hard. Well, I can't let them give them the milk bone and then cause maybe a stitch to open up. And then it's a bigger problem. So I kind of said out loud, like, oh, I don't want to let Molly out. And she's by the door. She's wagging her tail. And I wanted Ashley to say, like, oh, I'll do it. But she didn't want to let her out either. And I'm like, well, somebody's got to let this dog out. So here I go. I reluctantly go outside, talk to the neighbors, go back inside. And I'm just like, ugh, okay. I'm not talking the rest of the night. So we go upstairs. and we got Panera because I needed soup. Like I feel like I'm on my deathbed and I've just lost my voice. Over dramatic? I don't know.
I was gonna say you seem like you would be a joy to be around when you're actually sick.
I sleep when I'm actually sick, so people will probably be like, "All right, this is sweet. He's not talking." We pulled up Suits. Have you ever seen the show Suits?
Oh yeah, I've watched Suits all the way through.
I kind of pulled a Damon Benning here. I started watching Suits on TikTok, like clips of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was that him?
It was.
It
It was
him?
old DB.
Come on, man.
Yeah, there it is. There he is. By the way, Shane back in the studio. Shane, good morning to you.
Good morning. What can I do for you?
Nothing. I just wanted to say hi.
Just all the DB drops, all of them that you got.
It was like,
Can I hear the song?
What song?
I want to hear Collide.
Did by the light.
That
Ooh, that's
too.
a good one too.
Collide. It's a song. You and I collide. Do, 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 do.
I got on him one day for that because he did not do the beat right. He goes,
It's
and I'm like, no, it's do.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think
I
either
missed
of you
that,
have
man.
it. I don't
No,
think
that
either-
was right.
I don't think
Pull it up on
either.
Spotty right now. That was right.
We can't. That's we can't play music. Remember?
Well, as long as we play like 8 seconds, I think we're okay. Just go to the right part.
So let me ask you a question here. So you
Oh, you want to finally talk after I shared my entire story on how I didn't want to talk?
I was just waiting for you to burn yourself out. So you're significantly younger than I am.
Significantly is the key word.
Yeah. You're 26, 25,
26.
26.
And what are you, 28?
I turned 20. No, I turned 36 on Saturday.
Oh, happy belated birthday.
No, this upcoming
Oh,
Saturday. So
happy
you're
early
You're
birthday.
early. Yeah. So you're about 10 years younger than I am. Are you at the age yet where you get hangovers?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think mine started. I think
I got hangovers in college.
Oh, that's rough.
And the reason for that was I only drank hard on occasion. It wasn't like hey, I built up a tolerance and now I'm good.
Sure.
Well, I worked a lot in college, so I couldn't.
Yeah.
I remember one time, I probably shouldn't share this story, but I think I'm going to. I remember one time I was reffing a soccer game the next morning at like 8 a.m.
Oh yeah.
And as I'm like running up and down the field, like I can feel it coming. And you kind of like get a little taste of it, and you're like, oh no, you gotta hold it down, man. You gotta hold it down. I think that was the last time I drank really hard before a work something or other.
Sure, yeah.
Because it wasn't that I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't physically operate. It's oh my gosh, I feel sick to my stomach as I'm doing this.
Yeah, so because I think I had like occasional hangovers prior to this, but I think like 20 somewhere between 26 27 is where I like pretty much any time I drank any sort of heavily at all, that's where the hangovers would kick in. Like there was no avoiding them at that point. And so I just was you've crossed that threshold though. You're there. You're in the hangover age.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm here forever.
You've been for a while. Yeah. Yeah. There's no going back, unfortunately.
No.
Once you cross the threshold, you are.
Well, and then I get into the point where, I'm up so early for work. And so like, I don't really have the longevity I used to have either.
Sure.
With my friend groups, like they're like, oh, let's do this at 11 o'clock. And I'm like, yeah, let's go home. That sounds pretty fun.
I've recently decided I'm a one-stop guy. I'm not relocating.
Okay.
Like every once in a
while. Did you ever stay at that one stop too long though?
Oh, for sure. But I would rather stay at the one stop too long because once I go to a second location, I'm done. Without fail, this has been probably 2-3 years now where we get to a second location. As soon as I get to the second location, I am no longer having fun. Usually it's somewhere along the drive where I'm like
I'll still have fun.
Yeah.
But I'm gone.
I'm like, no, it's not even that I'm not like drunk or anything. It's we get to the second location, like get halfway there, and I'm like, yeah, kind of just want to go home.
Yeah, I get that feeling. We were watching I was over at a buddy's house. We had a dynasty fantasy draft. I know we're already in fantasy football swing of things, right?
Love it. Yeah.
So we did a 3-round draft, drafted some rookies, really fun. But we stayed and watched the Jake Paul. Jeez. Is it Jake Paul, Logan Paul?
Jake Paul. Jake Paul fought this weekend against Nate Diaz.
Which one's the YouTuber?
Both of them. All of them.
And Nate Diaz. And man, I don't know what fight was more exciting. Was the fight of Jake Paul, Nate Diaz better than the fight of Jose Ramirez, Tim Anderson? Because wait for it. In 10 seconds of a Jose Ramirez, Tim Anderson fight, you got the same amount of knockdowns that you got in Paul Diaz.
No, I don't know. I don't really know how people can, and listen, if it's the stuff you like, no judgment, it's not for me. There's not enough action in those. Like, I get that Jake Paul could probably beat me up. Like, I totally understand that. Not disparaging him, and he obviously works really hard. But I don't know how you can watch a fight like Crawford Spence
and then go to that one
and then be like, no. I'm also going to pay for Jake Paul, Nate Diaz. Like, I just don't understand it. And so I caught the highlights on the internet and all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot of bad heavyweight habits where you're just kind of like pawing at one another, and
it was not a good looking
clenching
fight.
And somebody's head ends up under somebody else's arm half the time. It's not good fighting. And so it's a spectacle. I get that, but I still want my spectacles to be somewhat entertaining. You know?
Yeah. Well, and so we watched the fight. We didn't pay for it. So we have buddies that pay for a streaming site called Stream Pass. So it was kind of like, when everybody used to share their Netflix account, like that's what we do with the Stream Pass account.
Sure.
So we were able to watch the boxing match, but yeah, there's so much hype
there.
And you're right. Like, you put anybody else in there that is relatively good, and both of those guys are going down. Yeah. Both of them. And I'm not trying to, dismay them, because they try really hard. They work really hard. Like, I'm not going to take that. And Diaz is old.
Well,
he's like 38.
MMA fighter, right? So like, you put him in an octagon, it's going to look different.
A lot different.
But
we were spoiled with the Bud Crawford Spence fight, and then you follow it up with that fight, and you're just like, oh man.
I mean,
this is rough.
Pick anyone from probably like super middleweight down in weight class, all the way to probably lightweights. Anyone in the top 10 of any of those divisions, because you get into the heavier divisions, it doesn't get as interesting. But you could pick anybody from any of those divisions in the top 10 of their respective division, and it would have been a better fight than Diaz and Jake Paul. And so I get that a lot of it is the celebrity and the spectacle and whatever. It's just not for me.
Is the fight between Elon and Zuck really happening?
I don't know.
Because I saw that trending on the new X, the new Twitter.
Yes.
Yesterday, and I'm like, I'm not clicking on this. This seems like clickbait.
Yeah.
I'm not clicking on it yet.
Definitely clickbait. And I'm going to be a little bit of a hypocrite here. I think I would watch that.
I would too. Oh, I would hands down. I may pay for that one.
I'm going to have to borrow your friend's Stream Pass. I'm not paying for it. But
well, this one may be streamed live on Twitter and live on Facebook,
live on
or
X.
Instagram or whatever.
They should stream it both on X and Threads, and whichever one gets the most views, that's the winner.
Yeah, unfortunately,
because nobody's going to land a punch.
Right. Unfortunately, I think Elon has.
He does.
He's at minus 800 if that were the odds.
He does
for Twitter versus Threads, just because people are so used to pulling up the Twitter icon, or now the new X icon. But
whatever the hell it is.
Yeah. Seriously, whatever the hell it is.
Thanks, Bo.
All right, so that was kind of my weekend. Did I ever show you the itinerary that I got sent for that weekend?
They sent you an itinerary for?
Oh man, so it was my fault.
I gotta say, I'm not a big itinerary guy when it comes to recreation, like having fun.
So, I love my brother-in-law and his best friend. He's he means well.
Sure,
big heart. But boy, when he sent this itinerary, I about fell out of my chair.
Has the phrase "he's a good guy with a big heart" ever not been followed by "but"? It's like, he's a great guy, but.
So here's what the itinerary looked like. Why can't I pull that up? Oh, here we go. You have to double click. User error. So this was Friday.
Okay.
So Friday, nice and short, but like, look how detailed it is. You have
Yeah.
the names going. Like, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, let me back this up. I asked for an itinerary because he wanted to do a group FaceTime call, and I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of that. So just send an itinerary. When I say send an itinerary, though, here's what I think. Hey, Friday we're going to the Cardinal game. That's at 7:15. If you want to meet at this person's house, great. If not, we'll see you there. Then Saturday, it's golf in the morning. We're doing this pool get together, and then we're going to dinner and we're going to mass. And great. If you can make things, let me know. If not, boom. No, this is the itinerary, and day 2 was even better.
Oh my!
Because we got here to 7:45, and it's great to go back on this now because they were late. And I'm like, how can you be late? Send out an itinerary.
I've been
they got to the golf course at 8:30 because somebody had to use the bathroom. It was the brother-in-law, but
I've been on international trips without detailed itineraries.
Yeah, and this is still Saturday. We're at noon now. I'm on page 2.
Gosh.
As we scroll kind of down to the Venmo breakdown.
Oh my gosh.
This is where I kind of lost it. Now, before I ask you that, or before I give my thoughts on this, if you were going to a bachelor party, would you expect the bachelor to pay for things?
No.
You would pay for everything for the bachelor.
So in my experience,
what's the standard? Because I'm going to Vegas. You would say everybody's going to pitch in to pay for my flight and my hotel room while I'm there?
So I think if you're going on a destination, you cover, like say you're the bachelor, you cover your own airfare, but once you get there, everybody splits everything else.
So you know what's funny about that? I am so on the other side of the spectrum. It's not even funny.
Really?
Like, you pay for your own stuff. What world do we live in where you don't pay for your own stuff?
It's a bachelor party.
It doesn't matter.
Only happens.
You shouldn't be forced to pay for my drinks. If you feel so inclined to buy me a drink,
so don't go to the bachelor party. If you don't want to pay for the guy's stuff,
no. It's not about going to the bachelor party. It's about saying, hey, everybody just pay for their own stuff. Like, the bachelor should never, ever go into something thinking I got this for free. No way. We don't. In today's world, we do not do that.
I think
we don't do that. I'm cool if I want to buy him a beer while I'm there. Let me buy him a beer.
I think that's the point of a bachelor. Not the entire point, but yeah, if you're going on a destination,
it's to celebrate,
cover your airfare. But
I've gone to birthday parties where I pay for my own stuff. Like, if I said, "Hey, Ravi, come out for my birthday," are you paying for all my drinks when I ask you to do that?
I think you need better friends.
Dude, you are crazy. I want you as my friend. You're coming to Vegas because you'll pay for my hotel.
No, everybody splits it. That way it's not that much money.
No, because they're paying for hotels. I'm not going to make them do that.
Exactly. They're paying for you. They just pay a little slice of yours. You're good. That's why you invite like 10 people. Everybody splits it up. It's like 10% of the deal. It's not bad.
This is where we disagree. I think you are so wrong in this light.
Well, listen, get better friends. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know. What
friends? At least
I'll let our audience think. Do you think people should have to pay for their own stuff?
Birthdays and bachelor parties, I think you should get comped.
Not me. Not me. Pay for your own stuff.
I'll pay for my own stuff the rest of the time, but come on now.
No, pull out your wallet. You have cards. I know you do.
And then when it comes
scan one of them and then grab your beer.
And then when it comes to be my friend's birthday, then it all comes back around.
But see? It should be a feeling. Like, I want to do this for you. It should not be I have to do this for you.
The feeling is that someone should pay for your
stuff.
stuff.
I'm cool with like pitching in for my soon-to-be brother-in-law to golf.
Sure.
Like, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with pitching in for his Cardinal ticket. Like, I'm cool with that.
Okay.
But I think at the bottom of it, we were buying his dinner. I know. Pay for your food, man.
No, let's go. Put it all on the tab. Give me that Venmo information that was in the itinerary.
I'm telling you, guys, late arrival to my bachelor party is Ravi Lulla. I'm telling you right now, because I know it's going to be a grand time. Hey, you got to give me some money for table games, by the way.
I got a thing this weekend.
Not expecting anyone to do that. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with Coffee and Cream.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
I'm pleased with the first week. I mean, it's been a real challenge in terms of what we've asked them to do. We've taken a ton of reps, ending with like now the new rules. Now you can only have 2 scrimmages in preseason where you tackle over 50% of the time. So we ended with like a simulated scrimmage with some tackling, but not nearly 50%. So really, really pleased. I think we're getting a lot of reps, and the guys are working really hard. I'm really pleased with our toughness. Really pleased with our mindset. That's okay. No, please.
The back end of that was Coach saying it's okay that I coughed during this soundbite. He's like, no, it's cool.
How
it's
dare
cool,
you?
man.
How
cool.
dare you?
No, Coach Rhule's just a forgiving guy. He is. He's in it for me. I'm in it for him. It's a two-way street, right? No, we'll get more into our thoughts on fall camp here in a few moments. Packed show today as we will discuss week 1 of fall camp. We will get into everything else that happened on Friday, as we kind of teased it in the opener about how drunk conference realignment has been since Friday. And well, there's a lot to get to, and a lot of people are reacting in different ways. So we'll touch on all of that as well throughout the show. We have 2 guests from the Pinnacle Bank Championship joining us as well. That's where we are right now. We're live on the 17th hole. Guys will start to tee off on Thursday officially for the tournament, but the Pro-Am is Wednesday. And you know, the setup has been going pretty well as far as I've seen. As we were driving up, they were just hanging the remaining banners up front, and we were driving past chalets and the other pavilions and tents, and I'm like, who did this? Like, how did they do this? I feel like I was just here. How did this all happen?
Well, I mean, none of the tents are as cool as our Hurrdat Sports Pavilion.
Nope. And if you find a way to get a ticket to it, it is all inclusive. So you can turn out like me, you can get loud and then lose your voice the next day at work.
At the Patron Zone.
Yep, you sure can. We are talking to Sam McEwen at 8:00 today, as we do on Monday. He's the sports editor at the Omaha World Herald. I'm sure he has some great thoughts on conference realignment.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, he may be going to the
good.
Who knows?
I mean, I would hope so. It's the thing going on in Omaha this week.
Jessica Brabeck will join us at 9:30, and at 8:30 we'll talk to Katie Caldwell, who is the coordinator for volunteers, and I'm sure they still need some help. It always seems that way.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever you get close, it's like, we could use the extra hand. So if you're interested, stick around for that interview at 8:30, and we'll find a way to get you hooked up with her. But before we go into conference realignment talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we heard from Coach Rhule on Saturday.
Okay.
Took the podium, week 1 fall camp over. And, you know, we were talking to Brunts last week, a little bit about the defense, and he's like, can you name me? Well, first we started with the wide receivers, and he said, can you guys name 7 wide receivers, like in the order that they should come? So we started with Billy Kemp.
I was saying get to 4 pretty easy.
And you know what? That's what we said. You can get to 4, and then it's kind of like oh man, who comes next? And
jumble of
who's been balling, who's
newcomers.
Been not. You know, it's a lot of young guys,
transfers and freshmen.
Right.
And
you can easily spit off Xavier Betts, Billy Kemp, IGC, and Marcus Washington.
Yep.
You can easily spit those guys off
in some order. Those 4, But then you go.
Next?
I mean, maybe Josh Fleeks.
But I mean, he just got back though, after
right? And I think he's
getting sent home.
I think he primarily is going to be a kick returner if he has a big role at all.
I mean, how is Malachi Coleman progressing?
Malachi Coleman was the next one I thought of. I don't know if that's going to be. I don't know if that's going to be a situation where he actually plays as a true freshman.
Demetrius Bell's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of get to a lot of unknowns in a hurry. I don't anticipate we're going to see Jalen Lloyd this year. That feels like more of a developmental
Ty Hahn's
project.
name has come up a few times.
But
after that point, you know, you kind of like are, you know, looking on the outskirts like, okay, hopefully we can stay pretty healthy.
I mean, really after the top 4, you're looking at a large group of guys that you're hoping to get a couple contributors from.
Right. So I say that all to say Coach Rhule basically kicked everything off saying safety is a strength of this team. And, you know, this comes on the heels of Miles Farmer heading to the transfer portal. And who else do you have left? So you're talking about a little bit of Isaac Gifford, and then you have Corey Collier, who got his name thrown out there a couple of times too.
I think they've got some options too, where like both Tommy Hill and Malcolm Hartzog can, I think you could move one of them and still feel okay about your corner spot.
I'd keep Hartzog at corner.
Yeah. Hill's obviously got more safety size, but I think they like Hartzog's instincts a little bit better at safety. So you've got some options back there, but the thing about Miles Farmer is like, I get that he played a lot last year and that shouldn't be ignored, but I'm not 100% sure he was going to start this year. I mean, they seem to really like some of the other guys in that group. And so is it a loss in terms of, at the very least, depth? Absolutely. But people are acting like you are losing a for sure starter, and I don't know that was the case.
Well, you are losing your second best leading tackler on defense. You would expect a guy like him to start. It's easy to say now because all through the offseason, he was kind of looking through the window.
Yeah.
And so I think it's easy to make that claim, but if he was locked in 50%, you could basically write that guy in as a starter. Miles Farmer is somebody that he's a really good football player, and he wouldn't have the track record to prove that and not be a starter. Like you couldn't leave him off the list if he was bought in at least 50% of the way up to this point.
Well, and see, I disagree there because if he's only bought in 50%, I think that's why he's not on the team anymore.
Well, obviously, but we're talking about hypotheticals. Like if you were kind of saying he's not going to be a starter at all, and that to me doesn't make a lot of sense when you're talking about the second best leading tackler of last year.
Yeah, from a 4-8 team though, like
right. But what else? What else are you returning? Right.
I mean, I think they've got a lot of guys they like in the secondary, like Coach Rhule was saying. I think there's a lot of options in the kind of safety market.
And I'm not saying you're wrong there.
I think he was going to be in the competition. Had he been 100% bought in, I think he would have been in competition to start still. I'm not saying he was benched by any means, but I don't think it's a for sure thing that he was going to be the starter against Minnesota.
So if Quentin Newsome was in the same boat, roles were reversed. You don't think going into this season that Quentin Newsome would be a starter?
I think Quentin Newsome had a more solid spot as a starter than Miles Farmer.
Man, I don't know. I think they're pretty close.
I just think they have more options that are closer to Farmer's talent at safety than they do Newsome's at corner. But again, I think that's a pretty good group. And again, if Quentin Newsome wasn't 100% bought in, like it appears Miles Farmer wasn't, then yeah, maybe they are in the same boat because the buy-in at this point seems more important to Rhule than the talent.
Right. Well, but you were kind of saying still, even if he was bought in, it wouldn't be guaranteed. And now, granted, let's be real. What's guaranteed in sports?
Right. I think
you really have to have a good offseason. You really have to show that you either bulked up or you stayed fresh.
The only guy that's guaranteed to start is Jeff Sims. I mean, if he stays healthy, honestly, I think the only guy you can look at with a ton of confidence say that's our starter is Jeff Sims. And that's because the other guy that would have been competition decided to go to FAU, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't think it's a big thing to say, hey, I don't know that Miles Farmer was for sure a starter, especially in a place like safety where you're going to play multiple guys anyway. Would he have gotten playing time and been in the rotation? Absolutely, especially with the 5 defensive backs they're playing. But I just don't know you could look at him and be like, hey, he's going to be the same impact on this year's team that he was last year. I mean, frankly, you probably don't want your safety to be your second leading tackler. Like, that's a problem in the first
Well, he's
place.
involved in every play. That's okay for me. That just means teams are airing the ball out a little bit more against you, and so you could want to work on your pass rush at that point, or even stopping the run. But it's cool for me if there's a roving type of guy that, like, if Isaac Gifford was second on the team and tackles,
that's a different role though this year.
But is it though? Because you're still kind of playing a strong safety-esque role, and you're a little bit behind the second level.
Yeah,
I'm okay with how things were.
I'd be okay if Gifford was your second leading tackler this year. I don't think Miles Farmer being your second leading tackler last year was the greatest sign for the defense.
I don't know. I think that just goes to the player. You want to be involved in every play, and so you're going to make sure that you are.
I think it has more to do with guys are getting to the secondary too often.
You can look at a lot of different things. Last year obviously wasn't a success,
right?
And neither of us are saying that right now.
Right. So it's hard to look at anything from last year positively, honestly. So that's probably more of the lens that I'm looking through it. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's a loss because of his talent for sure, because he's a talented guy. But I think Matt Rhule is willing to sacrifice some of those talented guys if they aren't totally bought in. And that's the biggest difference we're seeing between year one with Matt Rhule and year one we've seen with other coaches, whether it's Frost or anybody else, who have said, hey, we want to hit the ground running. We want to get wins under our belt right away. Whereas Matt Rhule has shown twice already. He's like, I don't care how many games we win in year one. The foundation has to be right. Otherwise, there won't be that many in year two.
Well, we'll further these thoughts when we come back from a break, because the way that you just put it right there is a quote that Coach Rhule used in his presser on Saturday. I'll tell you exactly what that was when we come back. More coffee and cream then.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the Rovers are safe. Rovers are safe. We go to post players and do the post. Before he was playing like that Nickel Sam in last year's defense, he's not that. I mean, he's in the back end, so he might drop down the box.
In 1 minute.
Phelan is. Yeah, Teddy got banged up again. Well, they're really fast. All right, are you? Corey's doing okay. Yeah, Corey's doing well. Well, they're really fast. All right, our young guys are unbelievably fast. There's a lot of volume in our offense. There's a lot to learn, so they're learning that pretty quickly. Right?
Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Well, they're really fast. All right, our young guys are unbelievably fast. There's a lot of volume in our offense. There's a lot to learn, so they're learning that pretty quickly, right? I need to learn all this stuff. But they're a tough group. They're physical. Really proud of a lot of them today. They're out there battling through. It's hot. We've been in the mornings. So it hasn't been real hot. And all of a sudden today it was hot. We don't practice inside. We practice outside. So they're learning to adjust to this. I think a couple of those guys, might help us. They're going to push to help us. We have some older established guys who played a lot of football, like Marcus and Billy and Fleeks and all those guys. But we're going to count on some of those young players. I think the key in our receiver room right now is there's a couple of guys like Ty Hahn and Alex Bullock who are, and some other guys that are really, really good football players, really dependable. Like I challenge Alex all the time. He's not a walk-on. He's a guy that just came here as a walk-on. He's a starting receiver, I believe. So, the young players, they're fast, they're explosive, they're dynamic. We're going to have an unbelievable receiving core with those guys at some point. It's just how fast they can learn this and handle the bumps and bruises of camp. They're trending in the right direction, though.
Let's go to that Rhule. Following week 1 of fall camp. Welcome back to Coffee and Cream alongside Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers. Happy to have you with us as we are live from the Pinnacle Bank Championship. The week of the Pinnacle Bank Championship. The tournament is yet to start, yet to begin. When did you put the shades on, Maverick?
During the break.
I didn't even see it. Have you had them on the whole time? No, you had your glasses on.
No, I had the glasses on.
Okay.
I switched them out because the sun's starting to rise over our beautiful views out here. And so, I was getting a little a little sunshine in my peripherals.
You shocked me there. I thought I was sitting next to somebody new. No, but this actually feeds right into what I was leading to into the break. Coach Rhule said Saturday, and we were kind of talking about Miles Farmer a little bit in that situation. And then, he comes back talking about the young guys and, what they could be. And that's exactly what the quote was. It's see people for who they are, not what they could be.
Mm-hmm.
And, he then went in to talk a little bit about the training staff and how the work that they've done and his nutritionists and how they started to look once they got to camp.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately what that quote means, and it has such a stronger, deeper meaning based on all the events that have transpired throughout the first week of fall,
mm-hmm.
is not to make excuses for people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't project qualities on them that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Know the person, help them get to where you want them to be, guide them, but also know that you just can't throw up everything and expect them to be that. And third, listening is 50% of this, just being able to listen.
Mm-hmm.
A good coach listens. A great coach guides with understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know what they are, you know where they want them to be, and then boom, that's where you go. And, that's a lot what Coach Rhule kind of stands by. That's what he's about. He's about getting these players somewhere, but he's also not going to have such high expectations that are unattainable,
mm-hmm.
but he will push you to your limit.
Well, it's kind of an interesting and seemingly conflicting dynamic there, but it's actually a really tough line to walk as a coach, where you have to appreciate and value guys for who they are right now and still be able to see what they could be able to help guide them to their full potential. But those are kind of seemingly contrasting goals there, because if you appreciate who someone is right now, some people may say that as, okay, well, then why do we keep talking about what I could be? Well, if you see potential in someone, that's probably a big part of why he recruited a lot of these kids to Nebraska in the first place. He appreciates who they are now, and he also appreciates who and what they can be in the future. And so it's not surprising to hear that from Matt Rhule. A lot of the things that we hear him say have a bit of a deeper meaning, but it is a really challenging thing about coaching, because a lot of coaches seemingly only care about what you can be in the future and what your ceiling is and your potential and all these things. And most of the time, for most guys, or whatever sport you're coaching, guys, girls, whoever, that until someone appreciates who and what you are right now, it's really hard to get to that future potential self, right? And I had this kid that I coached in high school that used to tell me he hated the word potential, because that's all coaches would ever talk to him about was, that we love your potential. We love your potential. And he's like, I'm pretty good right now too. And he was, to be fair, it was an accurate assessment of his talents. He was pretty good already. Was the ceiling higher than where he was at the point of I met him as like a sophomore? Absolutely. It certainly was. But he wanted to be appreciated both for what he could bring to the table right now, because it's almost like when you always talk about potential and what you could be, what you can be 2-3 years down the road, and never talk about who the person is right now, it seems like to that person, they won't be valuable to you until 2 or 3 years from now. And what if they never get quite to that point? Will they never be valuable to you? Will they never be valuable to the program? And so that's why that balance is so important, to be able to instill this confidence in who they are as people today, but also inspire them to strive and reach for what they can be 2-3 years down the road. And we'll see how successfully Matt Rhule is able to navigate that. But even being aware of that dynamic, I think, is a good start.
Well, and, I think what I really took at it, what I took that quote for what it was, is that he's a stay in the moment guy.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Rhule isn't worried about what's happening 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 4 years down the road. Like, he knows, like, it's always in the back of your brain, and, no one acknowledges it, but the focus is to stay in the moment. And that's really what this is saying. It's like, when you see people for who they are, you're right now.
You're present. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's staying in the present. That's why people all the time say, no, stay in the present. Like, don't think about the future. Like, don't think about, like, the struggles that may come. Like, if they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. And, like, it's hard to say because, as you said, to really open up your point, it sounds contradictory.
It does.
When you really hear that quote, like not what they could be. Like everybody should want to be more than what they are.
Right.
But why can't you just be good enough right now?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think staying in the moment is such a big key takeaway here, because that's what he's doing. He's not worried about what his strong safety could be 4 weeks from now. He's worried about what he is right now.
Well, and it kind of goes to this thing that I used to say about the way Scott Frost viewed Adrian Martinez, because Adrian Martinez, and we saw it last year when Adrian Martinez went to Kansas State and was pretty successful there before he got injured, was Scott Frost always seemed to be calling plays for who he thought Adrian Martinez could be, rather than calling plays for who he was right then. Because if he had called plays the way Chris Kleinman and staff at Kansas State called plays for Adrian Martinez, kind of stayed within himself, didn't ask him to do too much, he was really, really effective for them before he got hurt. And there were moments of brilliance at Nebraska for Adrian Martinez. Anybody who says differently just wasn't paying attention, right? But it was the inconsistency and the mistakes and the errors and things like that.
And the injury.
And the injuries. He had a hard time staying healthy throughout his college career, right? But when he was on the field, there were still these conflicts between, okay, he looks really good doing this, and then he makes these mistakes. And to me, a lot of it was the coaching staff saw the potential of Adrian Martinez and could never get themselves to refocus back on, okay, but what is he right now? Who is he right now as our quarterback? And obviously the results were very mixed at best. And I think that's something, we watched The Last Dance together a couple weeks ago when we were hosting, right?
Hey, you don't have to tell people that.
One of the, not together, separately, but at the same time. But one of the things that they said was Michael Jordan's greatest gift was being able to stay so focused and present in the moment, because that is a huge part of being able to perform athletically, is not to worry about, okay, what happens on the next play? What happens in a quarter from now? What happens in our game next week? If you're at Nebraska right now, Matt Rhule said this before, you can't even be focused on, okay, what's going to happen against Minnesota? We have to worry about what happens today.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's this dynamic that's really kind of conflicting with the coaching staff, because the coaching staff does have to prepare for Minnesota, right? They do have to start preparing for the season and start laying all the groundwork for when they are actually playing games. But when they're at practice, when they're in the moment, when they're teaching their guys, they have to be focused entirely on today. And it's the same thing whether you're focusing on the season or whether you're focusing on an individual player. You kind of have to balance those two things. And I think it's one of the harder things to do in coaching.
Now, if you, how do I put this? Okay. If you're trying to balance right now, what's happening this year, I'm thinking about the C people for who they are, not what they could be. I'm thinking about conference realignment now.
Sure.
So if you're a head coach, how are you trying to worry about this year and also worry about what's happening going forward if you are a coach on the outskirts of the country? That's what I'm not like,
So not in Nebraska.
Not in Nebraska, because Nebraska's pretty central to where everything is kind of coming right now. Like you don't have to travel as far as, say, Maryland has to go to Oregon for some reason. Like, how are you trying to balance like living in the present now and also knowing like, gosh, when I recruit, it's going to be so much, it's going to be so difficult for this, that, or the other. Now, maybe it doesn't affect football because football is a once a week type of sport, but I'm just saying a coach in general. Okay, so if you're like a smaller sports coach, like baseball that plays twice a week or more than twice a week because you're playing series, softball can go into that mix, volleyball even that plays on a Thursday and then a Saturday, and most of the time if you're on the road, you're trying to pair trips. If I'm
basketball at some of the smaller schools that don't have the huge basketball budgets,
right. How are you trying to stay in the moment with your team?
Yeah, so
because you used to coach, and that's kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah, so there's at the level that I coached at, which was very small college, you're constantly dealing with not ideal circumstances. And the one thing that we would tell our guys all the time was control the things that you can control. Only care about the things that you can control, because outside of that, you're really just setting yourself up for failure.
Sounds easier said than done, right?
It's simple, but it's not easy, right? It's really, really difficult, but but it's a very simple concept.
These are things we'll talk about with Sam McEwen coming up next. We'll also put this on hold. We will push this off till about 8:45, 9 o'clock. We'll get into more conference realignment talk. But the sports editor at the Omaha World-Herald coming your way next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio. Here is the sports editor for the Omaha World-Herald, Sam McEwen.
That's fine.
Sam McEwen.
We're gonna throw the ball, and you just stand back there and throw it where you want to go. That kind of thing.
Sam McEwen.
Are you guys going? Sure.
Now, Sam McEwen.
Top of the hour here on Coffee and Cream alongside Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, ESPN Radio here in Omaha, 590. We are live on Twitter, live on YouTube, the Hurrdat Sports YouTube page. Happy to have you with us. If you have a thought, 888-638-4876. We will get you patched through to Shane, and he'll patch you through to us. You can also send a comment in the YouTube chat room. We will see it there. But before we go any further, let's talk to Sam McEwen, sports editor at the Omaha World Herald, at SW McEwen, OWH on Twitter. Sam, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good, good. Hey, could you see yourself someday when you're retired, when you're like, hey, I'm going to hang up the newspaper, I'm going to hang up my computer, whatever it is, mowing lawns at a golf course? Like, could you be that guy?
My dad did that.
No way.
When he retired, he did that.
See,
runs in
the family.
So, yeah, I could see myself doing it, sure.
Yeah, I just told Ravi, we're out at the golf course today, Pinnacle Bank Championship week. And I'm like, oh.
Oh, yeah. I used to work there way back in the day. I used to work at Indian Creek when I was in high school and college. So,
nice.
New 9, the Greyhawk 9. That's the one that I spent the most time on, sort of carving out some of the new bunkers, and because that 9 was just getting finished as I started. So good memories of 5 a.m. Going out into the darkness at Indian Creek. I did that a lot.
In high school, I don't know if I'd ever call that a good memory.
It was good, because you know what? I think I worked there 2 years. So you get done with work. You go in at like 5 a.m. It was in the summer, mind you. It wasn't, during the school year. You get done at 5 a.m. and you start at 5 a.m. You get done around, 1. And you go golf.
Oh, that seems like a great life.
Yeah. So you go out there on the course. So you do that a couple times a week. You couldn't golf every day. You're just too exhausted. But yeah, I loved it. I mean, working on a golf course is a lot of fun. So yeah, that's cool.
Well, Sam, we just got done recapping the first week of fall camp. We'll get into some conference realignment talk too, but I'll start with fall camp. What are your thoughts on the first week of Nebraska football under Coach Rhule?
Well, I think there's probably some changes for some of those guys. We'll get a little bit more into that today now that they're through a week of it. Obviously, they're trying to create a very different kind of culture, sort of starting at whatever you want to call it, starting it at zero and building it up from there. I'm guessing that Rhule's probably enjoyed it for the most part. I'm guessing the players have found it interesting. I don't know if they've probably always loved it, but they probably found it interesting along the way. So, yeah, I think there's some interesting aspects of camp. Mouth Farmer is gone. That's too bad. That would have helped with depth. Teddy Prohaska's out. That's too bad. Not sure, they're probably going to be real smart and real safe with bringing him back the right way, because at this point, can't afford any more injuries there. So I'm sure they'll be really smart with that. We'll see where it goes from here. I think the players, they're picking the players they want to talk, so those guys are all pretty happy with what's going on. But you see the coaches come in and they're drenched in sweat. Everybody's working really, really hard.
Sam, I'm curious. You mentioned how, so much of this first fall camp is going to be about laying the groundwork for culture and everything like that. Is there, I'm going to ask you to compare here, and I know people don't love that, but is there an area where you think there was kind of the biggest deficit for them that they need to make up, whether it's in terms of culture or accountability or anything like that?
Yeah, I think there's, probably just a sense of wanting to win, wanting to get ahead of themselves, just wanting to win the games instead of putting in all the work and training that it takes to win games in the fourth quarter. I think Nebraska is very satisfied, with being close a lot and then losing the games and chalking that up to bad luck or needing a break or these things like that. And the media is more than happy to comply, and so I think I think Rhule's trying to change that. I think what Rhule understands and what Trev Alberts understands is Nebraska does not have an unlimited amount of time to get this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
He's talked about it a couple of different times about making Nebraska nationally relevant, and that becomes even more true now that you have Oregon and Washington in the system. It's going to become increasingly difficult to become old Nebraska or even medium Nebraska if you cannot get out of this tailspin soon. And so I think the kind of work that they're putting in is the kind of work that's necessary to get the job done. And not to say that the previous coaching staff didn't do that, but I think there's a sense of urgency surrounding the proceedings that make it evident that everybody knows that things got to turn around here pretty darn quick. Maybe not this year, but next year, the year after.
Sam, I'm happy you brought up Miles Farmer because Ravi and I went back and forth a little bit this morning about guaranteed roster spots. If he were a guy that would have been guaranteed to be slotted in as a starter this year, as you look back to last season, not a lot of guys that would make that list, but would Miles Farmer have been one of them for you that would have been a guaranteed starter, no doubt, if everything went according to plan with him and the culture and the relationship with this staff in Nebraska for this season?
No, I don't think so. I think he would have been a major contributor. I think he would have played a lot of football. I don't know that he would have started. I think Isaac Gifford obviously was going to win that composition and probably had already won it in some ways. And then I think Corey Collier's there, and I think Deshaun Singleton and Omar Brown and Malcolm Hartsock can play safety too if you need him to. Tommy Hill really turns the corner as a cornerback. He's got all the talent to be really talented, at that position. And so, but you can move Hartsock wherever you need to move it. He can play all those positions. So I don't know. I mean, I think Farmer was going to be a factor for sure on the team. I don't know that he was going to have 73 tackles or whatever he had last year. Again, he might have been, but you know what? This is a great opportunity for him to maybe do something different than he's done in the past. I mean, you look at, we'll see if he's able to become immediately eligible somewhere. I think he's graduated, so I think he can do that. But this is his 5th year on campus, and he's got 2 years of eligibility left, counting the COVID year. So this is a great opportunity for him to go somewhere else, and I'm sure he'll have opportunities at good schools. And maybe he can go closer to home. Maybe he can go, to the SEC. Maybe he can go to the Big Ten. I don't know that he's the fastest guy in the world, so I don't know if the SEC is the right spot or not. But certainly there's homes in the ACC and the Big Ten for that guy. I mean, he can play major college football and it's smart and all the other things. So we'll see where it leads him. But I don't know that he would have started here.
Sam, kind of sticking with the starters question there, and I know we're very early in fall camp, but is there? I kind of mentioned that I think Jeff Sims is the only guy I'm 100% sure is going to start. Is there a longer list for you, or do you think it really is genuinely pretty wide open? I know there's probably spots on the line and guys you feel pretty good about, but I think if I really had to be put to it, Jeff Sims is about the only guy that I would say is for sure starting against Minnesota, assuming health.
No, I think that I'm more confident than you are at this point. Billy Kemp, Marcus Washington, Nate Borkircher, Ben Scott, Bryce Benhart, Turner Corcoran. I feel pretty good about all those guys starting. We'll see with the guard situation because they have a rotation there. I don't know exactly how they're going to play that out, but the fact that Prohaska's hurt means Corcoran's going to play left tackle, and you're going to have Ethan Piper probably and Nuri Nwili at the guard spot with Henry Letufsky as a backup. So I think your line will be very close to set. Running back, I think, still up in the air. Number 3 wide receiver still up in the air, but so long as Marcus Washington's healthy, he's gonna start. And Billy Kemp, he's the best receiver on the team. So I feel very confident that he's going to play. So So that's on the offense. And then on the defense, yeah, I mean, we have a sense on 5 or 6. I think that seemed pretty likely, but the defense is a little more set, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think they've had a pretty good idea of who some of the guys are, just based on necessity. I mean, it's August 7th today.
Mm-hmm.
You need to start locking in, and my sense is they probably locked in pretty well at a number of the offensive line spots.
Sam, we heard on Saturday Coach Rhule say a strength of the defense was the safeties. I kind of lean. That's an obvious choice for me too, but I kind of lean defensive line as well. I don't think a lot of people are as confident in their abilities as I am, as I shared some opinions last week. But could I put them up against the safeties here as the strength of the defense, or am I just way out of the ballpark when I say that?
You cut out there for a second. What's the position?
Defensive line.
No, I don't think that they're among the strengths of the team at this point. No.
So I'm out on my island, and that's where I'll stand then.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think that's going to be a group that needs to come along. Obviously, Ty Robinson is a seasoned veteran. Nash Hutmaker has reshaped his body. One of the tricky conversations about what they're about to do with this defense is one of the reasons you run it is so that you don't have to be great on the defensive line. As Matt Rhule said on BTN, you're never going to see the same front twice. You're never going to see the same scheme twice. Like it moves around a lot. And so what you call a defensive lineman can change from play to play. And it's one of the reasons why you run is that you don't feel like, there may come a day where you get 4 dudes that are just, that's a defensive end, a nose, and a 2 technique. And you go to that 4-3 and you have a 4-man pass rush and you get it done that way. They certainly had some teams in the past that did it just like that. But they don't have that right now. And so, I think Robinson and Hutmaker, Gunnarsson has a lot to prove. He only has 8 career tackles, I think. Ruffon Buckley's barely played. Elijah Judy barely played. Who am I missing here? If Colton Feast were back, maybe you'd feel a little bit better about it. But yeah, I mean they've got a ways to go at that position. But again, one of the things that's going to happen with this defense is you're going to see things happen. You're going to be like, well, the defensive line's playing really well. And it's the nature of the defense. It's going to be challenging to always know where your landmarks are, things like that. Now, what I will say in return, though, is there are going to be times when that defense is right, and there's going to be times when that defense is wrong. When you have this kind of scheme, you're going to miss. And there's going to be some moments where a play creases, and you better have good tacklers in the back end. I think that's really one of the keys of the scheme. It's going to create some negative plays for you, turnovers, maybe even an interception or 2. But it is also going to create some situations where if you stunt or you blitz into the wrong thing, and they got the right play on, and that happens sometimes, you better tackle, because otherwise those plays are going to be house in.
We're talking with Sam McEwen from the Omaha World Herald. Sam, want to change gears for you a little bit here and get into conference realignment a little bit. Obviously, kind of over the weekend, we saw the apparent death of the Pac-12. And I guess just what was your overall thoughts as you're kind of watching this happen in real time, where it seems like Oregon and Washington are going, and then maybe they're staying, and then all of a sudden they're gone. And less than 24 hours later, they lose Arizona State, and Utah to the Big 12 as well. Just as somebody who's been watching college football for a long time, obviously the Pac-12 has got this huge, rich history. What's your thought process as this thing that we thought maybe might happen with the Pac-12 because of their TV deal just kind of collapses in front of our very eyes?
TV deal wasn't any good. And, what the Pac-12 commissioner was putting out there was optimistic at best. I don't know why 1.7 million people would subscribe to watch Pac-12 football on Apple plus or 2.3 million. I don't know. I mean, there could be existing users that that turn it on, but yeah, like it's one of these deals where the Pac-12 just didn't have a ton of options left after USC and UCLA left, and Oregon and Washington had a lifeline. They're going to take it. It's not that financially lucrative. They'll be basically a Big 12 member in the Big 10. They'll make less money, but they'll survive. And yeah, it was going to be hard. It was going to be really hard for the Pac-12 to survive the way that it was going, based on the number of people who were watching the games, the amount of institutional support in that league. You have certainly some schools like Oregon that are all in. You have some schools like Washington State and Oregon State that are in, but they don't have the same kind of financial resources and department power that Oregon does. And then you have Stanford and Cal, and they probably do have the resources, but they don't care. And so it's a challenging league from that perspective, is that you have a lot of different kinds of approaches. And I know Stanford's athletic department does quite well in the Directors Cup, but that's predicated on very small sports that only 10 to 12 schools pursue, and not only is that a scholarship way, smaller things that are related to training facilities out there and things like that have nothing to do with football or men's basketball or some of the other sports. Stanford's very good in other things. I mean, they're very good in volleyball and women's basketball and baseball and softball, and so they do a lot of things out there. But the main thrust of it is that a lot of those sports are sort of self-supported. So I don't know. I mean, I think I'm supposed to have an emotion about this, and maybe if I wasn't in August and I had just hours and hours of work every day finishing our special section, and maybe I would have more of an emotion. What I know is that I don't feel the same way. What I know is that I feel like we have to be honest about the nature of college athletics, and we also have to be honest about what's going on in academia. And the reality is, fewer people are going to college, and universities need more people. Or there are fewer people are going to these major 4-year colleges that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. College debt is a real thing, and they need to find ways to financially support what they're doing on the other side. There's a much larger conversation to have about academia and higher education that isn't really going to be had, not at least by sports writers. Sports writers are just going to lament that something has happened, and that stinks. So I think a lot of sports writers' thoughts could be adequately, summarized by Eli Drinkwitz over the weekend. It doesn't summarize my feelings at all. But I'm an outlier this way. Like, I don't see Eli Drinkwitz as grandstanding about the issue. He's not going to change anything, and nothing he's going to do is going to change. He's just saying that to get Twitter points, which he did. And I mean, that's not the realistic way forward. You can't just say we're not going to regulate NIL and transfer portal because Oregon and Washington went to the Big Ten, and we needed perfect moral alignment on all these things. That's not how things work. And so I think hopefully there's a way forward where you can make. On the flip side, I think Muffet McGraw had an interesting thought on Twitter of maybe can you separate college football from everything else and let the rest of it be conference model, and that may be something that they're able to explore. College football drives a lot of this conversation. A lot of these other sports don't make money. They may prefer being in a conference model. Of course, Muffet McGraw coached at Notre Dame, and they won't be in a conference. But I understand what she's saying, and I think she probably has a better point. That if we're going to start talking about the welfare of Olympic sports or smaller sports, let's talk to the Olympic sports coaches more than we worry about what Urban Meyer and Eli Drinkwitz say about it. Let's see what they want to do and have some conversations about where they want to go. People are wondering why athletes haven't said anything. Well, I don't know that the athletes care that much. We're going to say they care, and I'm sure we can put the words in their mouth, but you're telling them, hey, instead of flying for 3 hours, you're going to fly for 5, and you're going to go see places you haven't been to before and play a bunch of new teams. Now, how much do you hate that? And I don't know what kind of response you're going to get back. Most of these athletes are extremely well supported academically. They have incredible academic support institutions at their schools. Many of them graduate either a year to a year and a half early. They certainly do it in Nebraska. I think that our concern about their academic performance is undue. GPAs are going up, and up, all over the place. And so I think there's a lot of consternation around this, but a lot of that stuff, if you really follow college athletics closely, you know that a lot of that is just sort of sentimentalism. We may be moving toward a Power 2. If we do that, it probably benefits a lot of schools. And if you can sever college football from the other sports, maybe you got to wait for it.
Now, Sam, I did see some athletes take to Twitter regarding it, those that played in some smaller sports out in the Pac-12. I hadn't seen a whole lot, though, but I did see a few reports there. And, I do take into account certain sports that are smaller at schools that it may have a bigger toll on. But ultimately, I think because I'm an outcome guy, I'm like, well, where are we trying to go with this? And ultimately, I think the only place to go is if everything stays the same and you stay in the conference and you don't split it up like you were kind of talking about with, you take the old model opposed to the new model. If you don't do that, the only thing that makes sense to me is having literal divisions that mirror what they do in the pros, and then you keep people regionally, but they stay in the bigger conference.
Yeah, I think that's probably a way forward. Sure. I don't know exactly. The key is if you go to a Power 2, you have to have a relationship with the TV networks that reflects everyone getting an equal share, because the way it stands right now, Michigan would get way more or whatever. You have to find a way to get everybody to be all in on that. And the advantage of having a giant league is you're not playing, a gulag of teams. Like you've got your soft teams back in there again. It's, you can go play here and here. And, the teams that always used to win 10 can still win 10, and that's your reward and that kind of thing. Certainly there's probably a way to do it. Again, if we go to a Power 2, then I think everybody's going to be happy again. So let's just be patient and see how it plays out.
Sam McEwen, we appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk again next week. That is Sam McEwen, sports editor at the Omaha World Herald, at SW McEwen OWH on Twitter. We'll take a break. When we come back, we're talking Pinnacle Bank Championship with Katie Caldwell, volunteer coordinator here. We will talk to her next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Would you believe it if I told you, Ravi, that I'm obnoxious in the comments right now?
Yes, I would.
Oh, because there's truth to that. I am here. I struggled there for a little bit because we were on YouTube, but we could not see what we wanted to see. But now I see everybody on the comments, thanks to my buddy, Cards fan Matt, who says super snarky Cards fan Matt. Thanks to him for chiming in. TK, our boy, yeah, he said we are a little confrontational today, huh? And I said, you bet. You bet. Nick chimes in, birthday. Hell yes, pay for your own, but bachelor party, I can see either way. Nick, at least you have a brain, unlike Ravi. And TK says, again, this week is the week, boys. Week for what? You getting engaged?
I have no idea.
Birthday? I don't know. How you doing? Come sit down. We are now joined by our first guest here at the Pinnacle Bank Championship. It's Katie Caldwell. Is it safe to say volunteer coordinator? I was trying to find your position title. Tournament Services Manager sounds way better and way cooler than volunteer coordinator. But thanks for taking the time, Katie. And is it Caldwell? Caldwell.
Yep.
I'll get there, Ravi. Don't worry.
I don't know if you will, but
we're trying. Right? Monday's a trying day.
Oh yeah.
So how are things? How are things shaping up for you?
You know, we are doing really well. We are ahead of our volunteer count for this year.
Always a good thing.
Yeah, so we're at about 560 volunteers now. Last year we were at 554 for our total, so we're still raking them in, and we appreciate all and any help that people can give us. So come out, support us, and we'll be excited to have you.
So where are some of the biggest areas of need still where you're looking for volunteers, or I guess what are the biggest lifts here in terms of what volunteers can do?
Yeah, so we have a lot of opportunities for our marshaling committee. So that's when you're out on the course, you hold up the quiet signs and you're doing some crowd control. And that is a big need because this course is huge. It's beautiful, but you get some nice views of golf. And even if you're not into golf, it's just a great way to be out in the outdoors and whatnot.
Has anybody ever messed up that job before? That seems
no.
like a hard job to mess up, but I could totally see myself being the one that zones out at one point because I'm so invested in the golf that I forget I'm actually here to do a job.
Oh, no. Everyone does a great job that comes out to volunteer for us. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
So when you're out here on a Monday, obviously you've got the pro-am on Wednesday. The tournament starts on Thursday. Monday and Tuesday, what's your life looking like trying to get everything ready to go?
Yeah, so Monday, actually today, we have our Sandhills Global Pro-Am, and so we have a few groups going out, and you'll see them come down here on 17 here soon. So we have a bunch of volunteers out today, and they're in our Pro-Am committee, and that committee serves about 40, 50 people overall. So they do a variety of things. It's basically a mini tournament that we put on, and so they will do distribution, they will do marshaling, they will do check-in and registration, all of the things to make sure this runs smoothly for us.
Now, Katie, how long have you been doing this job in this role?
In this role, I just started in February.
Oh, wow. So brand new to the whole
rookie
thing.
On our hands.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my second tournament, though. I was the volunteer intern last year.
Okay, so what did you learn about last year that you knew either needed to be changed this year or enhanced, or, as you kind of look toward this tournament? I'm sure you have a ton of emotions and you may be a little bit nervous, but aside from all of that, what can you take from your previous time and apply to this year?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's just to smile and get through the hard days, because you can, if you just have a smile on your face and you're doing the things and you're getting things done and you're just out there having a good time, then take that as it is. It's not the end of the world. We're not doing brain surgery here. It's just a golf tournament. I know it's big for these guys that are coming out to play for us, but I took things very hard last year, and it was easier to do them, just to take it a little bit lighter this year. Light and fluffy. Let's say that.
Light and fluffy. That can be a t-shirt. Light and fluffy. Sometimes what I call Ravi.
Oh, dear.
So what's something that you're looking forward to this year? You kind of experienced the tournament last year as a volunteer intern. What's something that you're just super excited about for this year's tournament?
I'm really excited to see all of our smiling faces out here, especially on the course. I enjoy seeing all the marshals, especially our pink volunteer shirts. They are Barbie pink this year. Okay. So we are looking snazzy out here on the course. So
Can't be missed.
Nope. I'm very excited to see everybody, all of our little highlighter pink spots out there on the course.
There we go.
Now, Katie, how can people still sign up if they want to be a volunteer and are late to the party?
Yeah, you can visit our website, www.thepinnaclebankchampionship.com, and there's a button that you can click in the right-hand corner. It says volunteer. So just go there, and then you can sign up for whatever committee you would like to be in, and we'll get you scheduled and get you on out here.
What's the biggest hurdle you crossed so far?
Biggest hurdle? You ask a really good question.
I don't know about that. I just kind of think on the fly, and I'm like, you know what? It's whatever pops in my brain. I'm weird.
I don't know. There's just so many different. There's a lot of different moving parts to this. So I guess that would be the hardest part, is to accommodate everybody, and we want to make sure everyone's happy and in their right place. That's something that we really, really strive to make correct for everybody. So we want them to be happy. We want them to come back. We want them to have a great experience with us. and tell their friends. So just juggling all of that along with making sure everything is out on the course and just all the different moving parts that have to happen all at once are definitely a hurdle, if you will.
So let me ask you this. You've got all these volunteers signed up, always looking for more. What's your best sales pitch in terms of some of the benefits you get? You mentioned being outside here, getting to experience the outdoors and the golf. Like, what do you hear from volunteers that's their favorite part of being part of this whole thing?
Some of them really like the golf. Some of them really like to be out here with the next up and coming PGA Tour players. So some of these guys will go on and get their PGA Tour card later in the season. So it's just a matter of like seeing them out here. We've had a couple big names come out here in the past and do pretty well. So that's a big one for a lot of people. And then non-golf reasons would be, you know, you just get to help out the community. We do give back to all of our benefiting charities and here in Omaha. So we are Support Nebraska, doing business as the Pinnacle Bank Championship, and that that local piece really brings a lot of people out here too, and brings us together to make a better Omaha.
Now, Katie, last thing from me. Do you think it was easier this year to plan for this tournament because it's not the final stop of the Corn Ferry Tour?
You know, I don't really think that had a whole lot to do with it, because we like to make sure that we have everything in place and we do things well. So it's not as if we're holding certain things to a higher standard because we were the regular season finale last year. But we definitely have a lot of, you know, we just want to make things great for everybody. So we hold ourselves to a high standard. We keep that high standard as we go through the tournament.
Katie, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so
thank you,
much.
Katie.
I
Katie Cowell.
appreciate
And
it.
one more time, tell people how they can sign up.
You can go on to our website at thepinnaclebankchampionship.com and click volunteer in the right-hand corner.
Enjoy the tournament, Katie.
Thank
Thanks
you so much.
And we are still out at the Pinnacle Bank Championship on hole 17. It is the Patron Zone to the left and Hurrdat Harbor to the right when you are walking down the cart path. And what's great about this area,
I'll
too,
say you're not
Ravi,
kidding about harbor. There's actually a boat.
Right.
There's an honest-to-God boat out here.
well, and it's actually on the sign over there. So don't think I'm creative and came up with that, because there's smarter people than me.
I would never.
Yeah, thank goodness. You hold me to a lower standard than most. I appreciate that. But there is a boat that you can get tickets for and hop on if you come out to the event. If you find a way to get into the Hurrdat Sports Pavilion, no, Ravi will not sneak you in. I know who you are out there.
I'm not doing it.
Nope, Ravi said no, he's not doing that. But you can come hang out with us at hole 17, which is all pretty exciting stuff. Aside from the Pinnacle Bank Championship, I want to take a moment and tell you about the public media. In the deed, the Glory Memorial Stadium. We talked about this a little bit last week, and you know, a good friend of ours, you'll hear his voice throughout narrating.
Oh yeah,
this little documentary. Guess who it is?
I'm gonna guess it's Mike Sauter.
No.
Oh shoot.
I know, but I could see it. No, Damon Benning.
There we go.
Oh, come on. You almost had it, though.
So close.
Aside from DB's voice, it features interviews with Tom Osborne, Eric Crouch, Trev Albert, sports reporter Mike Babcock. It honors the 100th anniversary of the stadium, built to honor the men and women who served in World War I. Sunday, August 13th, 7 p.m. Central Time on Nebraska Public Media and Facebook Live. You can watch it there. We'll take a break. More CNC then.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Hey, welcome back. Coffee and Cream alongside Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers. Happy to have you with us. A couple of great guests. Katie Caldwell just stopped by it from the Pinnacle Bank Championship, which tickets are still on sale now if you are looking to find a grounds ticket or come out to any day from Thursday through Sunday. We talked to Sam McEwen at 8 o'clock. Lots of good thoughts there on fall camp and also on conference realignment, which is kind of where we are leaning toward now, toward the rest of the show. Just a lot of havoc on Friday as I'm walking into Busch Stadium and I see Washington, Oregon, newest members of the Big Ten. And I'm like, great, this is going to be fun to follow along with. So we have some new Big Ten schools. But before we give our thoughts, let's go to line one, Shane, and pot up Thomas. TK is on with us here to talk about the new Big Ten schools. And also some congratulations are in order for Thomas Kuchera because it is wedding week for the man. Thomas, good morning.
Good morning, fellas. Thank you.
How you doing? What's on your mind?
I'm doing great. Really blessed. It's the week, but I'm still pretty fired up from about last week when we were talking about USC. And I just have no faith in the Trojans at all coming to the Big Ten. I have no faith. I don't think they're going to be able to transition to a good enough defensive team to compete. And I see a lot of hype around their offense, and I think it's the same old story with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. Just don't believe in them. What do you guys think?
Well, I guess for starters, do you have any other thoughts, or do you want to hop off?
I was hop off. Hey, you guys have a great day.
You too, man. Thanks for the call. have to ask that question because we're not actually in studio.
Sure, yeah. It's a little harder to navigate.
Where we can see if he opts off or not.
Yeah.
But started off, I mean, it's a real concern because what we've seen out of Lincoln Riley teams in the past has been exactly what he said. It's quarterback you. It's all about the offense. And last year, Caleb Williams was hung out to dry in that game against Tulane. I mean, he was playing on essentially one leg, and
he got beat up by Utah a couple times too.
And Utah as well. It's a great point. But Utah is a really good defense.
Yes,
if they would have made it to the Big Ten, I don't think that would have been as much of a transition for them. I think they have the talent to compete right away. But as for USC, the Big Ten's been built on defense. We know that. But I don't think that I have as big of a concern with them coming over as most people do, because in the world we live in today, offense carries everything. Everything from start to finish. What you want to see in a college football team is a good offense. Nobody wants to see good defense anymore, because what happens? Those games are boring. We saw Iowa play San Diego, South Dakota State last year, and that final was 7-3, 7-3, and it's all. You know how they got their touchdown? Defense,
yeah.
And that was the majority of that team. But nobody had fun watching that team. But you know what you do have fun watching? 43-42 USC Utah games.
That game was incredible.
That
game was phenomenal.
You love watching those games. So for the fan, I'm actually okay with seeing the way college football has been transitioning and how it works with USC. But I think it is a big concern to have for a team that was once led by Alex Grinch and couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And now that they're coming over to a conference which has their act together when it comes to defense, they may struggle a little bit in that department. But this year is going to tell all for me. If they have a defense that is better than what we've seen under Lincoln Riley, and they're making progress toward being let's just say a manageable defensive team, then okay, things will work out. So it's a wait and see approach there. But if they don't, I agree with Thomas.
Well, there's an interesting dynamic there, right? Because I don't think it has to be one or the other. And USC is in a unique position where they can recruit at the highest level. They're going to be playing at the highest level in terms of one of the two best conferences in the country pretty soon. And they can obviously get the skill position players at the highest level as well. The difference to me between like an Iowa and a USC is Iowa was just so incompetent offensively, right? The defense.
You could argue that with USC defensively, though.
You really could, right? But I think the ceiling for the players that USC can get is higher than the ceiling of the players that Iowa can get. So it is a fixable problem to me. Now, if Lincoln Riley is able to find those guys, recruit those guys, have the right coordinators in place, all that kind of stuff, that's a different question. But it is a fixable problem for USC.
And it's all about having the right coordinator, too, with Lincoln Riley, because he's an offensive coach.
You have to complement the offensive side of the ball.
Well, and as a head coach, he's leaning toward being a quarterback guy.
So
he's leaning toward his offensive coordinator. He's not on the defensive side of the ball, which, if you really think about it, what USC could have benefited greatly from is getting Jim Leonard before he went to Illinois.
Oh, absolutely.
Could have benefited greatly.
A huge pickup for them.
Because USC just didn't happen overnight. So if you grab a defensive coordinator from the Big Ten, and that you knew your program was going to eventually land in the Big Ten, why not grab one of the best defensive coordinators in the league? That was a huge miss on their part.
That would have, it was a huge miss on almost everybody's part, right? For him to be an analyst at Illinois.
What do I not know? That's
everybody.
Well, I think
a lot, but I want to know why.
I think there was an assumption he was going to end up as a coordinator in the NFL. That didn't happen for whatever reason. So there's an X factor here that we don't know with Jim Leonard. But the USC thing is, because you look at Alabama, right? Nobody will go to Alabama and say, hey, the defense is bad. They don't have anything else. Their defense isn't the stalwart in terms of these 9-6 games against LSU that it was 10, 12 years ago, but they still have incredible defensive players. They get stops when they need to. It's a different style defensively. But what the Big Ten is based off of, and this is why Ohio State's been able to succeed, is the line play on both sides of the ball, right? That's not a shocking revelation. That's football, right? If you can control the line, you're going to win the game. But when you have these high-flying offenses, having the defensive lines to be able to stand up to the other Big Ten teams, having the offensive lines to be able to stand up to the other Big Ten teams, That's going to separate whether USC can be successful in this league or not. And not just USC. That's going to be whether Nebraska can be successful in this league. That's going to be whether Ohio State can continue to be successful in this league under Ryan Day. That's going to be the issue for Oregon and Washington when they come in as well. That is not a revelatory thing, but USC, for how high profile they are and how prominent they were offensively last year, they probably have the furthest way to go on those lines compared to some of these other teams. That Oregon got their lines kind of straight under Cristobal, continuing it with Dan Lanning up there. And so that's the big X factor to me, is if they can recruit and get the guys in place on the lines, then the offense will work. We've seen it with Ohio State. That type of offense can work in terms of scoring a ton of points and getting a ton of possessions, but you have to have the lines right also. Otherwise, you end up being a Mike Leach team, which I loved Mike Leach, RIP, but there was a ceiling to those teams because they never had the infrastructure on the lines to carry them past what the high-flying offense could do.
Now, TK comments, Lincoln Riley calls an offensive game that is so bad for his defense that they are already at a disadvantage.
I don't think that's a deal breaker. I don't think that's a deal breaker. You just have to play a complementary style.
You just got to manage the game better.
Right.
Really is what it is. And Lincoln Riley can grow too.
Sure.
Grow as a coach, grow as a person, whatever. But as you kind of like look toward the future and you look toward the transition, he's going to have to.
He's going to have to make adjustments for sure.
He's going to have to fix the problem defensively. And that's why I'm kind of in wait and see mode, because you know what hasn't worked for you. You know how far you can get by just being an offensive led team.
Which is basically the college football semifinal. That's the ceiling.
That's as far as you can go.
That's a good ceiling, but if you're at USC, that's probably not the place they hired you to go. That's not the place they hired you. And that's why I say it's a fixable problem for USC. For Iowa, fixing the offense is a harder problem because of the offensive coordinator who
I think that problem is pretty easy. How about you get Brian out of there?
But then you still don't have the recruiting upside that USC does, right? So you still have to go out and find the right quarterback and the right skill position guys. You got your lines in order at Iowa, but there's the other spots that it's a little bit harder of a sell. You go back years and years and years. I mean, the last really, truly dynamic quarterback that I can remember at Iowa is Brad Banks in like 2002. We're talking 20 years. They've had solid guys. You know,
That's been a minute.
Your Ricky Stanzies, your CJ Beathard's, those types of guys, but you haven't had a true dynamic game breaker at quarterback in Iowa in 20 years. That's the challenge at Iowa versus you can get linemen to go play at USC. I think it's an easier.
You can get a lot of players to go play.
You can get just about anybody to go play at USC, right? I think it's an easier fix at USC than it is at other places.
That's a great point. TK, we appreciate the call and the thoughts as we kind of talk about conference realignment and the transition. We'll get more into this as we head into our 9 o'clock hour. But here's kind of like where I rested on Friday. You had winners, you had losers, and then you had the outcome, right? We talked a little bit about my side of the outcome with Sam about how I think they'll go to divisions. I'll dive more into that as well. But the big winners here are, well, the sport of football. And that big sports will always be in the green, no matter what. If you play a big sport, a high-profile sport, you will always be in the green. You'll cash. You're the house.
Yeah.
And, you know, college administration, you can align with that too. You'll always make the right choice from the business point of view. But the losers, on the other hand, the student athletes in the smaller sports, they weren't thought about at all in decision-making. And granted, they are never thought about, really. Student athletes in general are never thought about when it comes to these decisions. And then you also have, you know, the remaining Pac-12 teams that are just kind of like, what are we going to do with you? What are we going to do? I don't know. Like, are you going to stay and try to figure something out? Are you just going to create something new? Are you going to go somewhere else? But that goes back to the academia side that Sam McEwen was talking about. Somebody out there is going to want the academics that Stanford and Cal brings. Somebody.
Yeah, it's just, is it going to be one of the major conferences? That's the major question.
Well, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll get more into conference realignment. Before we go, I'll tell you about the Beanery. The Beanery is the official coffee of Coffee and Cream. We smashed our cups this morning like we smashed my mom's banana bread so far. Well, Ravi, maybe not so much.
Yet.
He has his all wrapped up. As Sasha said, we need to pair that with some butter. And then that'll be a nice pairing with your cup from the Beanery. Plenty of locations. They'll be coming out with some fall flavors here soon, too. So make sure to stop by. They are some of the best, and they serve people coffee. That's their slogan over at the Beanery. All right, we'll take a break. 9 o'clock hour up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes.
Yeah, I really have no thoughts, honestly. Like, obviously I trust the leadership.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Coffee and Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes.
Corey's doing okay. Yeah, Corey's going. Yeah, I really have no thoughts, honestly. Like, yeah, I really have no thoughts, honestly. Like, obviously I trust the leadership. I trust the Big Ten, Tony Petit. Obviously I trust the leadership. I trust Big Ten, Tony Petit. Trev is awesome, right? So communicative and all those things. So, obviously I trust.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
Obviously I trust the leadership. I trust Big Ten, Tony Petit. Trev is awesome, right? So communicative and all those things. So, I'm kind of in my own little bubble right now, so we're just about our team, making sure that I think the key for all teams right now is as realignment happens in the coming years. I mean, who knows what the future is going to hold? Making sure that my job is to make sure that the University of Nebraska is relevant nationally, and so I just have a lot of trust in the Big Ten and the leadership, and I think it's the dominant conference of college football, and So we'll play wherever they have to tell us to play.
Well, it's easy for Coach Rhule to answer that question because, as I stated before, geographically, Nebraska is in the center of the country.
Yeah.
So it's a big recruiting bonus as you start, trying to figure out what the new Big Ten will look like and what kind of comes next with that. It's easy. As for teams that are way east or way west, it's not. It's not as easy to appeal to a recruit and say, hey, you get to drive, you get to, travel 1,200 miles, just one trip, or, you get to travel 8,000 miles throughout the football season, or whatever it may be for Rutgers or Maryland. I think Rutgers this year is 6,600 miles, and that's in the current Big Ten model.
Yeah, right.
So I can't imagine
it's going to be more. It's going to be more.
And it does take a huge toll on the athletes, but Nebraska doesn't have to worry about that. They don't. At least right now, all you have to worry about is winning. You start there,
right,
and then the recruits will come with it.
Yeah, I mean, the recruiting you don't really have to worry about. You do still, to a lesser extent than than some of the teams on the East Coast and West Coast, but you do still have to. It is still a significant uptick in travel for Nebraska to have to go out to the West Coast probably twice a year. Maybe they try and get it all done in one trip, depending on the sport. But it is an increase in travel for them. But what it does is, like you said with the recruiting, it increases the Nebraska footprint into other parts of the country, right? Nebraska's tried to go up and get players out of the Pacific Northwest before. Ndamukong Suh is a good example there of somebody they've actually been able to land out of the Pacific Northwest. They've gone into California before, done the whole Calibraska thing, and gotten some really good players out of California. They've obviously been in places like Texas and Florida and the East Coast. So Nebraska needs to have success in those places and actually physically being there sometimes with, hey, you're going to go play a game against Oregon, you're going to go play a game against USC. That can only serve to help your footprint in those areas. Now, I don't know how much or how soon that will take effect in terms of improving recruiting, but it can't hurt. It certainly can't hurt the awareness of people in those places for the University of Nebraska. So it is beneficial for them. The travel's less of the teams that it's really rough for is the West Coast teams, right?
Because you have to deal with the time change everywhere you go.
Well, and everything's a long trip, right? Everything outside of those 4 teams on the West Coast. And it's not like Oregon to Southern California is a short trip, right? Like that's a pretty lengthy trip in and of itself. And so going from there to Nebraska's your next closest team, which is literally halfway across the country, you're dealing with a lot of things that the rest of the conference doesn't have to deal with. But for football, it doesn't matter. It's all the other sports that you have, even men's basketball, which is a revenue sport, right? And they get to, for most places it is, and you get to have some of the finer things in terms of your travel and accommodations and things like that. You're still maybe going on 2, sometimes 3 road trips a week. That becomes a big deal all of a sudden, even with the nicer accommodations. But then you go down the line to the sports with smaller budgets, whether it's women's basketball, whether it's baseball, whether it's softball, whether it's soccer, all of these things.
Where you start running into some issues.
Those are the sports that it's going to get really tricky for. And, Sam brought up an issue that I've thought about before, and I think it actually makes a lot of sense in that maybe football needs to just become its own thing, where it is kind of autonomous. It sort of already is. The NCAA doesn't run the college football playoff. It doesn't have anything to do with putting on the championship at the FBS level. It's the only championship I think that the NCAA doesn't run is major college football. So it already has sort of separated itself from the rest of college sports. That's the way it's been set up. It makes a lot of sense for them to kind of be their own entity because they're playing a totally different game, not just the actual sport, right? But financially, they're playing a totally different game than everyone else. They have none of the same constraints. They have none of the same, even scheduling difficulties, right? You're playing once a week. That's so much easier to deal with, even with cross-country issues, than every other sport where you're playing multiple times a week. It makes a ton of sense for football to kind of be its own thing, be its own entity, and then try and figure out more regional, traditional conferences for all the other sports where you're not putting this additional undue stress, whether it's financial stress or actual stress, on schools and student athletes.
I think getting to 24 could be really huge for the Big Ten, especially if we look at the divisional approach. Because if you can add, say, let's just say they add Cal and Stanford just for the sake of this argument. Well, now you can really start pooling these teams into divisions of 6.
Yeah.
You could put all 6 Pac-12 teams, or what once were Pac-12 teams, in the same division.
Yeah, the
that
pod
could,
system,
that could be
right?
your
Yeah.
AL West, right? And then in the AL Central, you have Nebraska, you have Minnesota, you have Iowa,
Wisconsin.
Group 6 teams right there. Put
Illinois,
a circle around
probably,
them,
yeah.
right? And then you go out east. I mean, Michigan probably even extends into that circle.
Could be, yeah.
For the West. And
Michigan
then out
and
east,
Ohio and the Indiana teams can kind of go either way.
right? And then out east, you do a big circle around the East Coast.
Yeah, you got
Penn
Maryland,
State,
Rutgers,
Maryland.
Penn State.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can get to 24, ideally, I think that's where you need to land if you're the Big Ten. I was thinking 20 at first, but then if you get 20, who's the one Pac-12 school you add? Because if you don't add a Pac-12 school, then you're circling Nebraska into that mix, because that's the farthest west team that you really go.
So here's the bigger question, though, is I don't know that Stanford and Cal are the direction they're going with this, because they don't bring the athletic prowess in football that you want. Because I understand people are all out there that say, okay, Stanford's the number 1 athletic department in the country. I get that. It's because of all the other stuff, right? Stanford football has been up and down, has its highs and lows. Obviously, David Shaw has moved on, which I love David Shaw, but that's a really hard job out there. It's always been a really hard job. Before Harbaugh had the job, they were dreadful for years. So, yes, they've got some history with your John Elways and Jim Plunkett's and Andrew Lucks of the world. But, and don't forget my Christian McCaffrey over the 49ers there.
Who's that?
I don't know, just like the best running back in the NFL. I don't know. But you've got all of these football schools, and then you want to get in bed with Stanford and Cal, which doesn't really make a ton of sense, right? These are football moves that are being made. I think they probably wait out the ACC. I think that's the next move, which I still think the pod system makes sense, but it makes it more challenging if you don't have 2 more West Coast teams.
But what you could do, though, is do 4 then.
Yeah, you could do
4. Like, you really just have to keep the West Coast teams on their own.
Together, yeah.
And then work in, because there aren't those scheduled rivalries anymore. Like, yeah, you have 1 or 2 if you're in the current Big Ten model.
You would have a couple
what's
deal
to come.
breaker games.
But then you could have your one-off games out west.
And frankly, you'd only have to do this in all of the other sports. You wouldn't even have to do it you could keep it that way for football, but this is important for the other sports, for men's and women's basketball, for
baseball,
volleyball,
softball.
baseball. So like all the other sports that we've been talking about, those are the teams that it's important for. Because, again, you're flying across country once a week. It's not that big of a deal if you're football. If you're all those other sports where you're playing 2, 3, 4 games a week, if you're baseball and softball,
and you're on the road for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then you're required to come back to class.
Right.
You know what? Here's another thing, too. Even if you're not, traveling three different stops, say I play for, the Nebraska baseball team, and our road trip is, for whatever reason, it's USC. Then we go up to Oregon, then we go up to Washington, and we go back home after that. Just say that's the road trip for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Well, if I just even went to USC and back home, if it was a one-off, just say we played Friday, Saturday, Sunday, well, every teacher requires me, and not just teacher, the team requires me to be in class on Monday.
Yeah.
So I'm on the West Coast. We end our game at 10 o'clock. Say the flight back to Nebraska is, 3 hours?
From the West, about 3-4.
3. So say we'll go on the high end. We'll say 4 hours. Now we're back. By the time we got on the plane, we're probably back at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Best case scenario, yeah.
But you also have to say you skip ahead 2 hours because we were on the West Coast. So it's 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But then you want me to hit my 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. class. Here's where academics and sports have to now intertwine. You have to be okay with either sending the work early or letting them do that work from their bed, their dorm room, or doing it later. Let them sleep in, recover, and then get the work done and be an excused absence. I really think we're going to fall into that too with individual universities, and like everybody will have their own rules. But I think the best way to operate too, in regards to looking out for the student athlete with travel time, is to give them that day buffer, but still having them do the work. Or do the homework, or you know what?
You're not trying to get out of
everything
anything.
nowadays is recorded, right? Record your lesson and send it in an email to the athletes.
Well, so here's what I don't really understand is why, with so much of education being virtual or online or whatever now anyway, why is there still the rule of being physically present in class when you could either catch it on the plane with the plane's Wi-Fi or whatever, right? Catch the recording of it later. As long as you're getting the work done, I don't totally understand why it matters. I'm not asking for these guys to get out of anything, just being flexible with what you allow them to do for me is really important. The other thing is, maybe they schedule the West Coast series a little differently. Maybe they go Thursday, Friday, Saturday instead of going Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Maybe shift the baseball series a little bit that way. The other thing that's a possibility, and this is kind of a weird example here, but so I went to a school where a lot of people ended up working in churches, right? And so their internships and stuff were at churches on Sundays. And so a lot of schools that do that just give them all Monday off because they'll go travel out to different places and take a 2, 3, 4 hour drive to go intern at a church and then come back on Sunday. So a lot of those schools just give them Monday off. That would also be an option if you're worried about traveling on weekends and being back and just going to a 4-day class schedule. You still get each of your classes twice a week on an every other day deal. It seems doable in a lot of different ways, but there are going to have to be adjustments and some compromise between the athletics and the academics, because that's the place where we haven't done a ton of thinking about this, right? We've thought about, there's money here and, Oregon and Washington needed a place to land and all these other things. We have to think a little bit about the academics of it all. And I know that's an afterthought in all this. I get that. But unless you're going to break football off away from everybody else, like I talked about, then we have to start thinking about these things, because there are real world consequences to, the swim team and the cross country team and all these other teams that don't have the same luxuries of the sports that we watch on television.
Now, Amazing Daniel on YouTube asked, is there a cutoff date for new teams to be admitted to the Big Ten to be able to play in 2024? I don't know if there's a so-called cutoff to ending up playing in 2024. I know the cutoff for conference realignment was supposed to be July 1st, but is a deadline ever a deadline anymore when we talk about sports?
As long as everybody agrees to it, nobody cares.
Well, and not only that, I think if you really look logistically, I think you can pay a certain amount for an exit fee at any time.
Yeah.
And it just depends on how far you are away from that so-called quote unquote deadline date in order to do that.
Also depends on where you're at with the TV deal. Part of the reason it was so easy for the Pac-12 schools to leave the conference is because they didn't have a deal in place after this year. And so there was nothing tying them to that conference from a legal standpoint with television contracts or whatever past this year. So it became really easy for them to leave. It's the same thing we haven't seen the ACC poach yet, is because they do have that grant of rights deal that has those teams tied in financially
until 2036.
Yeah, until 2036. Now,
how do you get out of it?
Well, so that's a really interesting question, right? Because there is a number. There's always a number. The number I heard for Florida State, because they're the ones that have been, we'll call, whining about it the loudest at this point.
Are they whining or are they just antsy?
It's legitimate, right? There's legitimate gripe to be had on their part because there's probably greener pastures for them. But there's the number that I heard for Florida State, and I don't know if this is accurate at all, right? Because nobody knows what's actually in the grant of rights deal. We've just all been told it's impenetrable, okay? Which I find very hard to believe. But what I heard the number is, at this point, with 12 years left on the deal, is $300 million to get out of it, which is a hefty sum for any athletic department.
Come on, I have that in my back pocket. Come on, 300 mil.
I will take just a little bit of that if you just want to share. Did you win the lottery this weekend?
No, I didn't win the Mega Million. No.
Nobody did. We're gonna be at 1.55 tomorrow.
Yep, and I got a Lucky for Life ticket just because.
But Florida State's looking at, we'll call it conservatively, a 9-figure bill. Okay, so obviously that's,
and let's say that's the bill for every team.
Yeah,
not just
which
Florida
it probably
State.
is, right? So you're looking at that and you say, okay, that's probably not something where they can just write the check or even, put it on layaway. I don't know what they do with that kind of.
Hey, can I pay this off monthly?
Yeah, it's like you go to Kmart and you give them the thing. But what I've actually heard is that Florida State has started looking into private equity partners to finance their move out of the ACC.
It's really the only thing unless you have that one.
Unless you have the Matt Ishbia.
Rando person, the Ishbia, or like say, the local to say Buffett went to, whatever school. It was like, okay.
He's just writing the check because he's a billionaire. It doesn't matter, right? But
and Oregon has like Nike
Phil
connection.
Knight, he's got the Phil Knight connection, and he can write that check and you're good to go. He didn't have to, so good on Phil Knight. But the really interesting thing part about the Florida State thing, though, is that would be the first time that I'm aware of that an athletic department would be tying itself in such a major way to private money. And I know we've got boosters, but the boosters aren't getting a return on investment in financially speaking, right? They obviously get something out of it for them. They get power, influence, they get the nice box seats, whatever, right? But if you're dealing with private equity, you're talking about an actual financial return that would be expected of Florida State. So whether it's I would imagine it is a cut of future earnings. That's the only way I can think they would pay it back. That gets really interesting because all of a sudden you're swimming in very different waters, and the detachment from amateur athletics, quote unquote, becomes vastly larger. There is a gulf between, the softball team at Florida State and the football team at Florida State, which now has private equity money. And then what
now
is that?
Has an owner.
Well, yeah, exactly. They have a board of governors probably at that point outside of the university, which becomes really, really interesting. Do they get a say in hiring and firing of coaches? Do they get a say in the next athletic director? What all do they get a say in for their money? And then you have to start wondering, okay, do they become part of the collective? Do they start contributing to NIL and paying players so that they can get an even better return on their investment? It is a crazy path to go down in terms of, I don't think it's crazy for Florida State to explore, but in terms of the consequences of that type of a move.
Well, and it'll take a lot of time to pay that back too. I mean, you're not talking about paying that back. I mean, you're talking like, a couple decades probably, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Especially because if they move to the Big Ten now, you wouldn't be getting a full share.
Your share may be $40 million, right? Maybe.
Yeah, you're probably like Oregon and Washington are getting half shares, right? Until the next contract. So you look at that and you say, okay, I'm trusting not only for this private equity to get me out of the contract I don't want to be in, but I'm trusting that the next contract at the Big Ten
is
going to be enough to make this worth my while. Because listen, I know people say the TV money's not going anywhere. It's probably not, but what's it going to look like when the next Big Ten deal is up? Because streaming's on a little bit shakier ground than it's been, or than we thought it was going to be at this point. The television deals, I get that live sports are still the most highly sought after commodities, but I just don't know what the finances are going to look like in the next time the Big Ten deal is up. So by tying yourself to private equity, and again, that was just a rumor that they might be exploring, but I think there is a whole rabbit hole there that I don't know that you want to go down if you're any institution, but Florida State specifically.
And you don't want to take the approach of there's always more money. You don't want to take that approach either, because now you could sacrifice losing control of a lot more than what you gave up initially. And that would be a worry of mine if I go with a hedge fund here, because
what does private equity get control of?
Right.
What do they get to decide?
Especially with an institution.
Yeah, right. I mean, do they get to decide like academic standards for admission for certain athlete? You know what I mean? Like, there are so many tentacles to what this could impact that I think you have to be pretty careful in what you decide to do there. And listen,
the more money you spend, the more say you get. And we've seen that with Live and the merger with PGA. The more money you spend, the more say you're going to have.
We see it with boosters now, and there's not even a legal financial agreement in place there, right? We've seen it before.
Because you don't want that money to go away, especially with boosters, because that's not a forever guaranteed thing.
Right. And so you look at that and you say, we've already seen boosters get guys fired because they didn't like how it was going and they threatened to pull money or whatever. And so now you've got that, but it's a legally binding agreement that they are giving. Like, I don't know. You'd have to be really careful in the terms that you agreed to for that private equity money. And you're probably better off just staying in the ACC, if I'm being honest. The other option, if you're Florida State or any of those ACC teams, is to take 7 schools with you. Because if you can get over half, and again, nobody's really actually seen the grant of rights, so this is all speculation. But the thought is that if you can get to over half of the teams to leave the conference, that the grant of rights becomes void. So if it were me, if I were Florida State, I wouldn't actually make the private equity play. I would try and leverage it to get the other teams that probably can't afford to go the private equity route, your NC State, your Wake Forest, places like that.
Your Virginias.
Virginia might be able to. They're weirdly rich in Virginia. They're just not that good at their sports outside of
okay, fair enough.
In football, at least, they haven't been great lately.
Maybe
but like
maybe Tech.
I don't know. Yeah, Virginia Tech. I don't know what kind of money they have. Like Miami, I know they've got money in some places, but not others. Yeah, Wake Forest. So you go to some of those teams and say, hey, we want out. I know that you may not have a place to land, but if these teams, let's say the 4 of us, the Florida State, North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, we all have private equity deals. We're leaving regardless. Have fun in your new AAC version of the ACC. Maybe you can leverage those teams into joining you to leave the league so you can leave for free.
Yeah, you need your big dogs to go too, though.
Yeah, your Clemson,
your UNCs, your Florida States, as you had already said. You need those guys to go too.
Clemson and Florida State are the ones that you would have to get to go in order for the leverage to work, because losing those makes the conference dramatically.
And you know what? We kind of talked about it. Even if Miami stayed, I think you're okay. Like, I don't know if Miami's considered one of the big dogs in that conversation.
Not right now.
So, but you would want them to go to.
Yes, absolutely.
Because of just name prowess and
location.
Recency in regards to success. But aside from all of that, it's like, really the only 3 teams that I'm worried about here are Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State.
Yeah.
And if you can get those 3 on board, you can probably tell NC State, like, hey man, why don't you come with Big Brother here,
so that you don't end up in a shell of a conference,
right? And then NC State makes the first move, and then you start looking at like the Louisvilles of the world, and they're like, well, actually, I probably could fit in pretty well with the Big 12, and I'm in that area, and like, okay, so
they already took West Virginia, they could take me,
right? So there are those conversations, but as for the student athlete, I really do worry for the young ones, like not the young ones, like the smaller sports,
sure, yeah,
because my fiance ran cross country. I'm not saying like they traveled, across the nation or whatever for meets, but when it comes to preparation, especially for like baseball and jet lag and things like that, and I think of like how fresh your legs are, like that's what I would worry about with a cross country or a track runner.
And we haven't even gotten to school yet.
That's what I'm saying. So like if I have to travel from Maryland and go to USC and I'm a volleyball player, like, what about my legs?
Yeah.
Like, I gotta jump half the match.
Yeah,
I gotta move. I gotta dive on the ground. Like, am I gonna be fully there? Those are the smaller sports really worry me in this case. All right, we'll change gears and talk Pinnacle Bank Championship again. Next, we talk to the tournament director, Jessica Brayback.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
You know, we're out on the course, and all I can think about is, man, why am I thinking about this? Because I came back and lost my voice because I drank too much. So I'm thinking about beer on the course. Like, I'm on the golf course, and I'm like, I could use an Acres Ale right now. Why not? Brewed with Nebraska corn, and I know I could put some away as we play around, but I can't play around just yet because the course is too nice. I would tear it up. I would tear up those fairways, and nobody wants that. So I'll just stick to drinking my Acres Ale, watching the pros or soon-to-be pros get after it while they're out there.
You know, I'm not as much of a golfer as you. I like
another place you like to drink, or are we talking about this?
I am talking another place I like to drink. I like to go out to my Omaha Storm Chasers games.
Oh, good place. Really
they are
good place.
Finally back in town.
And on Thursday, you get the $2 beer day.
That's right. You get $2 beers. My favorite day, though, is Wednesday. You got Bark in the Park Day.
Oh, I went to Bark in the Park with Molly last time they had it, and it was sick. She loved it.
She
told me.
My dog can be a little crazy, so I usually go, and I just like to hang out with other people's dogs because all dogs are good dogs. But Bark in the Park on Wednesday.
No, only my dogs.
As you mentioned, $2 deals day on Thursday. They're here back in town starting tomorrow against the Iowa Cubs. They're here all the way through Sunday the 13th. Make sure you get out to Werner Park for the Omaha Storm Chasers.
All right, at this time, let's welcome in Jessica Brayback, tournament director over at the Pinnacle Bank Championship, which oddly enough, last time we chatted, Jessica, Ravi was in the chair too, so he's getting his full Brayback fix as we talk Pinnacle Bank Championship. First off, good morning.
Good morning.
How's the stress level?
Doing well. We got tee times going this morning for the Pro-Am, so it's that lull before the storm again, I think.
Okay, so we just got done talking about the Storm Chasers, and now the Storm before PBC Pinnacle Bank Championship. Tell me this. Has everything worked out according to plan?
Does it ever?
Okay, I thought I'd ask.
Come on.
What's a good day? Like this percentage of things went the way you wanted them to. What's a good day?
Yeah, I've never thought of that. I would say, if 70% goes according to plan, that's probably pretty good.
Because you never want to hope for that. So
right, exactly.
About that. It's like, let's be realistic. 65% will go right today, but we don't know what the other 35% looks like. Okay, any updates or any new things since we last chatted a couple of weeks ago?
Sure. I'm very excited to have everybody out here this week at the club at Indian Creek. As you can see, we don't have rain. Fantastic.
Check.
So check. That's going according to plan right now. So that's going well. So I would say, we might see some different names on structures, but everything is going to look the same or improved. So for instance, we're down here on 17, par 3. We have the Hurrdat Sports Pavilion, which is a great place to watch some golf. It's right next to the Patron Zone, which is air-conditioned public dining.
Ooh.
Yes.
AC. You don't get AC all that much.
On the golf course? No.
Exactly. And then our KPMG fan zone on the 9th green. It also views the 18th green, and then we'll have some Spectrum snowballs. So if you want to get a little snow cone for the kiddos, or we have some boozy ones available if you want to really have a good
going to
afternoon.
say this snowball thing sounds right up my alley.
Yes,
and then you mentioned booze, and I'm like, uh-oh.
You had me at boozy snow cone.
Now, okay, so you mentioned the Patron Zone, and this may be a dumb question because I should know it since it's right next to our pavilion.
You're fine.
Is it open to the public, or do you have to have a special ticket?
You do not have to have a special ticket. I'm glad you asked, because I think sometimes people see that and they think because it's air conditioned that they can't go in, but they
and it's right next to a big tent, and somebody says you can't come up here, but why could you go in there then?
So it is open to the public. We're putting up last finishing touches on some signage. Cutshell's getting it set today. So it will say open to the public. Please go in there and enjoy.
So we've got obviously a super busy week. You've got a Pro-Am today.
Yes.
Another one on Wednesday, and then the tournament starts on Thursday. So is tomorrow kind of like your breather day? You get to catch your breath a little bit?
Tomorrow's the breather day where you say, okay, what went wrong on the Pro-Am? So we need to fix for Wednesday.
It's your soft launch.
It is,
okay.
yes. This morning was a little bit of our soft launch. Yes, exactly. And really trying, Tuesday, since there's no one out on the golf course except for professional golfers in their practice rounds, we're trying to get all those hospitality areas set. So we're trying to set the bars, we're trying to set the concession stands, making sure the tables are where they're supposed to be, the chairs are where they're supposed to be, because anytime you can have all that done, it's a lot easier than doing it at 5 o'clock in the morning and trying to get things out before the players are out there.
Okay, Jessica, I'm a golf fan, but say I wasn't a golf fan for this hypothetical. Give me your best elevator pitch to a non-golf fan on why they should come to the Pinnacle Bank Championship.
I do this with my best friend all the time. It's just a great place to be. You're going to be missing out if you're not here. So it's a community event. It's great because, yes, it's a sporting event, but there's a little bit for everyone. If you want to come out with the family, the golfers love autographing the balls, giving them to kiddos, really trying to help that promotion and just embracing the game. But even if you just want to walk around the golf course, it's beautiful out. If you want to get your steps in and go have a beer and just kind of walk around and check stuff out, it's a different place. It's very unique in that you're not assigned to a specific seat. So you can really
and you never
enjoy
get the
everything.
chance to really walk a golf course while play is happening.
Hanging out.
Like you can't just go to a random course and say, hey, can I just walk the cart path today?
Right.
People are going to be like, what?
Yes, that's very weird.
So you're right. You get that experience. How many steps do you know? Like, have you done it on your watch yet? How many steps?
Not.
Because a lot of people try to hit that goal of 10,000 steps in a day, and I'm curious to know if we're close. If we walked the 18.
I bet you're getting your 10,000 in pretty easy.
You would have to. My watch has been dying all the days that we've been out here, so I'm sure that we're getting there.
That's a pretty good indicator that you're getting your steps in if the watch is dying on you.
Well, the other day I worked really hard and my watch had restarted.
Oh no.
Talk about disappointment.
Isn't that the worst where you I'll do it sometimes where I'll go to the gym and I forget my watch. I was like, well, no, this isn't even going to count now. What's the point?
I know.
I just will go home.
Imagine the disappointment though of having the watch on and then it not tracking how much you do.
That's even worse, right? That's so much worse.
Yes.
Okay, so as we kind of look toward Thursday. I want to skip to first day tournament golf. I asked this to Katie. I'm going to ask you this too, because it's not the final stop anymore.
Correct.
Or at least this
Correct.
year. And for the next 3 years, I think at least.
Mhm.
As you look at this championship opposed to last year's,
Sure.
is it less stressful for you at all knowing that it's not the final stop?
There's different things. So, for instance, the card ceremony, we were very involved with planning that and having the extra families of the players come to town and helping accommodate that. I would say that maybe the stress level or what needs to be getting done shifts, because a lot of what we had to do was later in the week waiting for Sunday, where now it's earlier in the week. So today we actually have qualifying events out at Highlands Country Club and Wilderness Ridge. Wildlands. I can't talk today.
It's
golf
the watch.
courses. Yes, it's the watch. Wilderness Ridge in Lincoln.
There we go.
And so there are 8 individuals that can qualify and get spots into our event. So there's still that Monday qualifying event that they have. And we had that before, but when you're the regular season finale, you don't get that. So that has been a lot of fun to have that back. So when that happens, we're going to have that really big influx tomorrow. We'll be busy with, if we need a local caddy, getting everyone registered, or some players that, so if you're not familiar with it, it means that they just haven't been playing well enough to get in on their own. So maybe they're on the Corn Ferry Tour, just having a rough few weeks. And so then they're going to be trying to figure out if they're staying in Omaha or if they're going to be going to New Jersey, where the next event is next week.
There you go. So obviously, I'm sure there is a lot of moving parts and a lot of stress on your part. But what's the part that you enjoy the most, the part that you look forward to?
I would say, I have those nervous butterflies where, okay, it's here, but yet you get to see everyone. And everyone is so excited. They're ready to go. With a lot of partners, even, such as Hurrdat Sports, we plan and we go through all these ideas. Wouldn't it be fun? And then execution standpoint, and you're like, this is it. Like, sometimes I don't always enjoy it as much as I should. So it's that reminder of, this is the best job out there.
Sure,
You're benefiting charity. You have the community out here. Like, let's embrace it. Everyone have fun. Thank the volunteers that you see. Thank the sponsors that are out here, and just really remember to the Corn Ferry or on the Champions Tour for a few years. And so comparing that to the Corn Ferry Tour, those guys understand the importance of doing exactly what you just said. They understand that if they have 10 minutes to go meet a sponsor that's been a big fan, that goes a long way for the tournament because it helps with that sponsorship. Much like the kiddos participating in the RSM Youth Day on Saturday, having those kids an interaction with the professional athlete for an hour, like it's just something fun that they can do and enjoy. And the golfers, I think they had more fun with it last year than the kids did. So they, I appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. So I think from that side of it, they get it. And so, noticing the exemptions we have out here in the Monday qualifiers, some of those guys are so appreciative to be here that they'll really work with saying, what do you need me to do? I'll do anything.
Jessica, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Enjoy the tournament.
Yes, thank you.
We'll take a short break. We'll be back with the sports cleanup up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
All right, welcome back. Coffee and Cream alongside Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers as we wrap this thing up on a Monday. Thanks for joining us. We're out at the Pinnacle Bank Championship, and it is absolutely beautiful. We were just talking to Jessica as she was about to drive away, and you know, they have a course meteorologist, which I thought was kind of unique,
Incredible.
kind of interesting.
I love it.
You know, I'm kind of wondering now what else they have that, you know, most other people don't for a big golf tournament like this. So that's pretty sweet. Maybe we can get them on later on this week. Before we go to the sports cleanup, I'll take a moment to tell you about Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's your one-stop shop for all your car needs. They are so good about being invested in the community as well. They have a give back program, which is up to you, Ravi. So say, Ravi, you're going into Dingman's, you have a problem with your car, you know, hopefully not, knock on wood, but say you end up at Dingman's, they'll work on your car and you get to then donate to one of the 3 programs that they have set out, but they donate the money. You choose which organization gets the donation. I think that's like such a cool way to get people involved in charitable organizations here in town. And they're all about investing in the community and investing in youth. Another place where you can go if you have an issue, maybe it's personal injury. There's only one location that I'll send you to, and that's Dyer Law. The Dyer Law team is there to provide that helping hand when you need it, no matter what you're dealing with. 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with trusted professionals about your personal injury claim. That's Dyer, D-Y-E-R .law. Shane, do you happen to have the sports cleanup intro?
For you, Andrew, I do.
Oh,
Things you wanted us to get to from the weekend, but we didn't.
cleanup on aisle 6.
It's the Coffee and Cream Sports Cleanup on Hail Varsity Radio.
Okay, Ravi, the big thing I wanted to first talk about with the sports cleanup was I'm disappointed. The U.S. women's national team knocked out in the round of 16 to Sweden. Not only were they knocked out, this was the final year of a bunch of greats on the team, kind of like that strong core group. You had Megan Rapinoe, you had Julie Ertz, who retired. Alex Morgan did say that she would come back. But aside from that, like the powerhouse of what we once knew was United States women's soccer. No more after getting just completely destroyed this year. And I say that with such reverence because of what they've done. But the expectation that was set for this team every single tournament and watching them operate, they never looked ready to play. And every time they had a chance at, getting over the hump, they couldn't capitalize. It just wasn't their year to get back to the final.
Yeah, well, and obviously offensively, they struggled a lot. They only scored 1 goal in their final 3 matches of the tournament. They only scored 3 against Vietnam. A lot of people thought that was going to be, 5, 6, maybe more goals. And
I believe they tied somebody too when I was out in Gatlinburg, and the only reason I know that is because I bet on them.
Yeah, so it was I believe the Netherlands.
That's exactly what it was. One apiece.
That was the only goal they scored in their last 3 matches, and so they really, really struggled putting the ball in the net, and that's not something we've typically seen from this U.S. women's national team, and that's something they're going to have to figure out. Now, there are a lot of really talented young players kind of making their way up now, and that was kind of the interesting dynamic of this team. Is you had the older guard that you mentioned with like Ertz and Rapinoe. Some of them we had already seen move on, like Abby Wambach from the previous World Cup. But some of these kind of stalwart players that we had come to know and love for the U.S. women's national team were getting towards the end of their careers here. And there was, I don't want to call it a tension, but there was an interesting dynamic between the young up-and-comers and the older guard that was still kind of hanging on for their last World Cup here. So it's going to be really interesting to see moving forward what this looks like. I don't think this spells doom and gloom for the U.S. women's national team by any means, but I do think they're going to have to deal with a couple things here. Kind of getting some seasoning for this new young group of athletes that they've got coming up that's super talented, but obviously doesn't have the experience that this last group did. And then also dealing with the fact that the rest of the world is catching up with them in a pretty serious way. And I know there's been a handful of countries that have been really good and really competitive with the U.S. women's national team over the past several years, but there still seemed to be a gap between them and the rest of the world. That gap is closing pretty much seemingly every year, every tournament we see, whether it's the World Cup or the Olympics or whatever else. That gap is closing in a hurry. And, it's kind of like it used to be with men's basketball on the international stage at the Olympics. There used to be an enormous gap, and then teams, because of how dominant the U.S. was in those sports, it's grown the sport globally. Women's soccer has grown globally in a way that the U.S. probably has some credit for, the same way the Dream Team grew basketball globally with their performance in Barcelona. So, it's part of it's kind of a demise of your own making, because you make the sport so popular around the world that everybody wants to start playing. That's something they'll have to deal with. I don't think it's a doom and gloom situation for the U.S. women's national team, but I don't think it's going to get any easier either.
And frankly, there were some players on the team that were distracted with other things going on, with being a pioneer for whether it was equal pay or
sure. There's been a lot going on.
There's been a lot of stuff too with divide in politics, and those distractions can not only weigh heavy on a person, but it can also lead to a lot of criticism. And when you don't perform at the standard that you're supposed to, you're going to get called out for those distractions. And so you have to be able to find that balance as an athlete or as somebody that is well known in your respective sport, because you are a public figure. So I don't want to point fingers, but there is that potential of, hey, you were distracted, and because of this distraction, it bled into something else, and now the culture of the team is what it is, and you lose in the round of 16. And here we are today. Aside from that, you had a big blockbuster trade in hockey yesterday, which was kind of shocking. DB, if you were in the chair, would be, pumping his fist because he got Erik Karlsson. Erik Karlsson is now a Pittsburgh Penguin, and here's how it reads. This is a lot. I mean, it's a 3-team trade. Penguins acquired Erik Karlsson, Rem Pitlick, and Dylan Hamiluk. Also a 3rd-round pick in 26. The Sharks, who I think got the worst end of the deal, got Mikael Granlund and Mike Hoffman, along with Jan Ranta. But they got that 1st-round pick in 2024, which is top 10 protected. But still, that's not what you're looking for. I mean, Erik Karlsson is Erik Karlsson at the end of the day. And then the Canadians were involved in that trade too, who got Casey DeSmith from the Penguins to help with the, I don't know, as they're juggling 2 other goaltenders. They're trying to find some, solidified, true number 1 goaltender there. Allen really wasn't it last year. They leaned on him to be it, but he wasn't. So you have some options there in Montreal, but all in all, the Penguins seem to get an A+ deal, especially because they got Erik Karlsson. And it looks like here's what the Penguins are doing. They're thinking old and staying old. Malkin has, I think, 3 years left on his contract. Crosby has 2. Letang is up there in age. I think he's like 36 or somewhere around there. So the Penguins are playing to their strengths, and I think that's why they're given an A+ in a deal like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you've got an older core like that, you kind of want to extend that championship window as much as you can by taking advantage of what you got on the table right now. Obviously, bringing Karlsson in is a huge addition for them as well. So, it's honestly what I was hoping the Warriors were going to do last year, and they finally did this year by bringing in Chris Paul. Like, don't run from the fact that you're aging as a group. Embrace it and just try and maximize that window. It looks like that's what the Penguins have decided to do.
Now, Major League Baseball is something to continually be something that you pay attention to at this point. It is August 7th. We are getting closer and closer to the end of the season. There's still a ways to go. I want to say there's about 40-ish games left, somewhere around there.
I think we're right at 50.
Okay, so 50. So there you go. 50 games left in the season, depending on who you're rooting for. Watch this dip, though, with the Arizona Diamondbacks, because they have really fallen off. They were, at least a couple weeks ago, the team that was kind of hanging on by a thread, and now all of a sudden they are 8.5 back in the NL West, which is pretty shocking to see. The Centrals remain the same, so is the East, but it does look like the Phillies are finding some rhythm again, kind of like they did last season, some second half life.
I don't think they're catching the Braves, but they got
but we predicted the Marlins would fall off, and after the trade deadline, we knew the Mets were transitioning, so they won't be an issue. And then you kind of get the same teams as you go up toward the East, Central, and West. But seeing the Diamondbacks just kind of get kicked and stay kicked while they're down, like it's not something you want to, or a position you want to be in if you're an Arizona Diamondbacks fan.
Well, and the thing that I'm looking at, obviously, as a Red Sox fan, I pay pretty close attention to the AL East. Don't want to talk about where the Red Sox are in the AL East
when they're 3 games above 500 and still 12.5 back.
Right? Yeah, that division is crazy. But how about the Orioles sharing the 70 win marker with Atlanta as the only teams in the league right now at that threshold? I think
you're telling me you didn't predict that.
I think the Orioles might
be better than we've given them credit for.
Well, they're certainly ahead.
No one wants to buy in yet.
Well, I think we just keep waiting for them to run out of steam, maybe run out of gas a little bit. But they do have a ton of young talent, both on the roster and in the farm system. And maybe they're just early. Maybe they just got here early.
Well, and they added Jack Flaherty at the deadline, who's been really good for that team so far. Okay, one final time, I want to set a reminder for you. A reminder, August 13th, Sunday at 7 o'clock on Nebraska Public Media. You are catching the one and only Damon Benning narrating In the Deed, the Glory Memorial Stadium. It's Nebraska Public Media's newest local sports documentary. It follows the evolution of the stadium. Again, one more time, that is August 13th at 7 p.m. That'll do it for today's show. We'll see you tomorrow.